All right. So you can't remember the last time you did absolutely nothing, just like purposely, and actually felt okay about it. Like maybe you weren't sick or forced into it by exhaustion. You just chose to stop and you didn't spend the whole time waiting for the guilt to show up. I want you to think about that for a second. This is different than like a nap that you crashed into because your body gave out, right? This isn't like a Sunday afternoon where you spent half of it present and like your phone was in your hand, mentally still running tomorrow's to-do list. Like it was actually stopping and being present. And good morning as you guys are all coming in. Okay. This is an actual full stop where you're not feeling like you have to earn this first. You weren't, and like we're paying for it after the fact. Like you felt guilty for resting. Have you guys ever felt that? If you're sitting right there trying to think of the last time that happened and you're coming up empty, you're exactly who this morning is for. That person who you feel like you can't lean into rest. So there's a chapter in Leviticus that's going to explain exactly why this can be so difficult for so many of us. And I want you to know that before we go into it, it's not because you're bad at rest. A lot of times it's because somewhere along the way you started holding on to something that was never actually yours to carry alone. So good morning as you all are coming in. Good morning, good morning. Quick question. I adjusted some of my audio settings and I think I may have kind of figured out like how to deal with the buzzing. Does it sound okay this morning? I had to adjust the sound on TikTok Studio natively and just bump it up. So curious if it sounds okay. I tested it, but I don't know how it sounds on your end. And thank you so much, Cindy. Okay, so you keep holding up this idea of rest being difficult because you're scared what happens the second you let go. Okay, so I want to ask you all a real question before we get started. Where is one area of your life where you kind of feel like, or you know that you're running yourself into the ground and you're not actually resting? It doesn't have to be work. I think that's more commonly where it tends to pop up, and it might be, but it could be the way that you're showing up for your kids, your marriage, your friendships, even your own body. Like where do you guys see that? Maybe one area where you're like, I think that God is asking me to lay this down a little bit. Thank you, Sandra. Yes. I told you, I was like, oh my gosh, I'm like really blonde. Really blonde. I'm getting used to it. It looks a little bit more so. I kind of half expected there to be a little bit more of like the bigger streaks of brown, but I like it. I like it. It doesn't help though that this lighting is making me look a little bit lighter too. I'm actually a little bit tanner in person, but it's fine. So, good morning as you all are coming in. What is one area of your life right now that maybe you feel like you're running yourself to the ground? Some examples I gave you are like it could be work. It could be you're pouring out so much for others. Where is that for you? Okay, so there's a chapter in the Bible where God actually tells an entire farming nation to stop working the ground for a full year, and he does that on purpose. He wants them to trust him with what happens next. Most of us, I don't think we've never once let ourselves believe that instruction actually applies for us too. There's a lot of us that feel like that. But like I could take a full year off and just trust in the Lord. That sounds foreign to us, right? Here's what I think is actually underneath this for a lot of us that feel that way. It's not that we don't want to rest. Like I think we genuinely do. And most of us aren't lazy, okay? I think that every single one of us has a faith in Christ. It's not that we don't trust God in general. Somewhere, I think deeper, without ever actually deciding it on purpose, you started carrying things as if it belongs fully to you, personally to you. Like it's our responsibility to hold everything up with no backup, no help, right? That's false burden. We've talked about that a lot before. It's the weight of ownership on something that you were only ever handed to steward. And you can't rest while you're carrying something that you believe would collapse the moment you set it down. right? Can you guys fully rest if you feel like the moment I do it, it's just going to collapse? The moment I fully lean into rest. Have you guys ever felt that? Like, I have to continue going. I have to keep doing these things. I can't let the ball drop. I'm the only one in my family that can do this. Good morning as you all are coming in. My name is Vanessa. We do these Bible studies each and every morning. I call them our coffee and calling. Thank you, Sandra. You're so sweet. I told you guys not to look at me. You can't look at me as you go as I'm on the live. You just have to listen. You guys already saw me anyway. I was so nervous to show you. This is like the blondest I've ever gone. My son, my 4-year-old, he keeps saying that I look like Elsa's sister, Anna, when she gets that like white streak in her hair. It's so cute. So if you all are new, we go verse by verse through scripture. I do it in plain language. I don't assume that you have any knowledge of scripture. I have no assumption that you've ever opened a Bible before. I try to relate it into our everyday. So I encourage you guys to comment questions as we go. I read every single one of them. Even when I can't respond to each one in the moment, I always try to get back to it. And there are replays available for you if you need to hop off early. And if you guys are on the replay, you guys can comment as well. This is obviously the live, but I know that sometimes when you guys are watching this, it'll be the replay. So if this is your first time being in this room, can you let us know? We want to welcome you in as we get started. We want to tell you good morning and welcome you in. So here's where we're headed this morning. We're going to stand next to a farmer who's told to walk away from his own harvest for an entire year and then figure out what to do, like what that would actually look like to take, what that would actually take to trust in the Lord fully. We're going to hear like a trumpet sound across an entire country on the same day, and then it's canceling every single debt at once, whether it had been paid off fully or not. How awesome would that be if once a year all of our debts were paid, our slates were wiped clean? So we're going to sit with a lot of hard questions that people are afraid to ask out loud. Like if God commanded this and Israel never once did, why weren't they punished, right? We're going to sit with that idea as we kind of go through. He commanded it, but they didn't follow through with it. And what that actually tells you about how he deals with what we've missed. By the end of this morning, I pray that you know the difference between something that you're managing for God and something that you've been that you have been holding on to, that you've been carrying like it's yours to lose. Because there's that difference in there. That's a whole reason why so many of us can't fully lean into rest. So we're going to get started here in the study. Before we do, I always encourage us to pray before the study. And I invite you to put in your prayer request. It could be one word, whatever that looks like for you. And then can you guys actually hear my music? Sometimes I think this initial song is kind of quiet. And I feel like it's a little low. So I'm going to invite you guys to put in your prayer request. We'll pray in and then we'll start this study. Okay. I always invite you all to find another person in the chat just to pray over them. You don't have to tell them that you're praying over them, but I just invite you to find one person and see what they put in the chat and pray over them in that way. So, Heavenly Father, thank you for this morning. Thank you for allowing us to gather. Please fill us with wisdom and understanding of your word this morning, not just information, but let it hit the parts of us that need to hear you most. Let it take hold of us and transform us. Let us see more of who you are so we can walk in alignment with your will. Thank you for being the God that sees every part of our lives, everything that we're navigating, all the comments that we put here. Father, we know that you know them so intimately. I pray that today lift someone up. I pray that we can find community and strength in one another. Thank you for bringing us together today to gather. I pray that you fill me with wisdom and discernment to represent your word in the way that accurately speaks what you want us to hear today, what the Bible actually says. Thank you for giving us a space and filling the room. In Jesus' mighty name I pray. Amen. All right. So I'm going to take you guys back to where we were at. It feels like forever ago. Doesn't Monday feel like so long ago? Monday feels like forever ago. So we were in Leviticus 24 on Monday. And I'm going to give you guys a quick orientation if you're new to this series. So we started in Genesis. Okay. So all of the replays are available for you. And if you guys were not aware or you didn't check the email, I actually sent you the vault. It's live on my website now. The only thing that I'm still tweaking is I realized for some reason there's more episodes missing than what I originally thought. So I'm trying to track those down. And so there might be, I think there may be like maybe 6 or 7 that are missing. For sure, Genesis 1, 2, 4, 5 are missing. There's like Genesis 34, which I know I recorded. And then I think there might be just one other random one. So you guys, those are all available to you on my website. It looks like this. If you go to EdenandEmpire.com, it looks just like this, where there's a section that says Bible study. And then you select the path that says Bible study replays, which is option 1. And then there is the entire vault, and it looks like this. Oops, go away, please. It looks like this. Now, I do want to say that I need to add the oh my gosh, stay put. Sorry, give me one sec. I got to lock that down. It keeps wanting to. Okay, so it looks like this. However, because when I originally loaded it, it was the thumbnails directly to YouTube and my page kept crashing because it was just too many on there. So now I have to manually go in and put cover images, and that'll take time. I'm not in a hurry to do that, but I will. And so just know that there's a button that you can select and it will take you right to the videos. But it's just a more organized page. So if you guys want the replays, you can sign up for all of those. Those will be sent out to you each and every day. They're available there. And then you can get the text reminders. For some reason, I feel like my text reminders are just sending at the most random times. So we'll get that figured out. But if you weren't in the studies at the very beginning, they're available for you. We started in Genesis, where we followed one family becoming a nation, and we watched that nation end up enslaved in Egypt. They were enslaved for 400 years. And then when they walked through Exodus, it was God rescuing his people through Moses. Then we watched the sea splitting and the wilderness. And once they reached Mount Sinai, God started handing down an entire way of life. Not just worship instructions. He gave them food and clothing and sickness. Or he didn't give them sickness. He gave them an entire way of handling money and food and clothing and land and how to treat one another. That's the book that we're in. We're in Leviticus right now. It's one of the most revealing books in the entire Bible because it shows exactly what God cares about when no one's watching. So before we go any further, I want to answer something that actually changes how you read this entire book. Because a few of you guys have asked a few versions of this. So in Exodus, God kept calling Moses up the mountain. He kept giving him real revelation. There was real distance between Moses and everyone else. But Leviticus opens differently. Leviticus chapter 1, verse 1, it says that the Lord called to Moses and spoke to him from the tabernacle of meeting. Not from the mountain, from the tent in the middle of the camp. And I want to explain why. So at the very end of Exodus, once the tabernacle was finished and set up, the glory of the Lord filled it so completely that Moses himself couldn't even enter. We see that in Exodus chapter 40, verses 34 through 35. God's presence relocated. It was off of the summit into the tent, into the center of where his people actually lived and slept, where they cooked dinner and spent time with their families. Leviticus actually never shows Moses climbing back up to that mountain during the book itself. When you see verses later, you'll see this tomorrow in Leviticus 26 and 27. It's going to say that these laws were given on Mount Sinai. That's using Mount Sinai as the name for the whole encampment at the base. not a literal return. God didn't call Israel up to him anymore. God moved into the middle of where they lived. That matters for everything that we're about to study today, okay? I'm bringing it back to the heart of what we're going to be looking at. It's because a God who moved into the middle of the camp instead of staying on the mountain is not a distant landlord. He's not a distant landlord handing down property law from far away. He is a God that is present in it. Okay? There's one more piece of it that sets it up for where we're going today. Why does God speak to Moses throughout all of this and not Aaron? Okay? Aaron, if you guys remember, is the high priest. He's ordained. He's the one who's actually being consecrated as high priest. So why not speak directly to him? Aaron's role and Moses' roles are two different jobs. Aaron actually gets to execute what gets revealed, but he's not the one receiving it. Moses is. Moses had already established back in Exodus as the one that God spoke directly to face, as a man speaks to his own friend. That's what it says in Exodus chapter 33, verse 11. So there's a history working against Aaron specifically, because God has that history with Moses, speaking directly to him. Okay. You'll notice a few chapters later, God does address Moses and Aaron together. Okay. So chapter 24, when we were in it, there are two things that look very unrelated at first. There was the first half that covers keeping a lamp burning continually in the tabernacle. Good morning, Stormy and Christina, and all of you guys that just came in. And baking 12 loaves of bread that stayed on display before the Lord, replaced them weekly. It was a lot of small, repeated, unglamorous maintenance that was happening in chapter 24. The second half of the story, though, a man ends up fighting in camp, and he says something against God's name as he's angry, right, in the heat of this fight. And the community had to figure out what to do. So God gave very specific instructions, and that man was put outside of the camp and he was stoned. Here's why those two halves actually connected and why it matters for where we're at today. So the lamp and the bread, they teach that faithfulness is mostly the unglamorous, small, repeated things that we're doing day in and day out. And God notices those things anyway. The second half of it teaches what comes out of your mouth in the worst moment. It's taken seriously. It's not just brushed past, especially when it's against the name of the Lord. So what they do together, they show a God who's paying attention to the small, repeated things that nobody actually applauds. And then what happens when someone gets pushed past what they can carry? That's exactly where we're going to be at for chapter 25. Because chapter 25 is going to ask you, it's going to ask you what you do quietly, repeatedly, when no one's forcing you to do it. And it's going to ask you what happens in you when you've been carrying more than what you're supposed to. Okay? So that's where we're at for 25. I know that was a long setup, but we're here. Okay? So I'll read through verses 1 through 7. This is the Sabbath year. So, and the Lord spoke to Moses on Mount Sinai, saying, "Speak to the children of Israel and say to them, when you come into the land which I give you, then the land shall keep the Sabbath to the Lord. 6 years you shall sow your field, and 6 years you shall prune your vineyard, and gather its fruit. But in the 7th year there shall be a Sabbath of solemn rest for the land, a Sabbath to the Lord. You shall neither sow your field nor prune your vineyard. What grows of its own accord of your harvest you shall not reap, nor gather the grapes of your untended vine. For it is a year of rest for the land, and the Sabbath produce of the land shall be food for you, for your male and female servants, your hired man, and the stranger who dwells with you, for your livestock and the beasts that are in your land, and all its produce shall be your food." Okay, so what we're seeing here, in the New King James Version of verse 4, it actually reads like this: "The land shall keep a Sabbath to the Lord." But when we look into the Message translation, it puts it a little bit more plainly. It says, the land gets a year of complete and total rest. It is a Sabbath to God himself. It's not just a break in like their farming schedule. And I call that out because that distinction actually matters a lot. This isn't an agricultural technique that God happened to bless. It's an act of worship that is aimed at him. And it's performed by leaving a field alone. It's like, just let it be, okay? So I want you to picture what an actual Israelite farmer, like picture that, an actual Israelite farmer. And they're standing at the edge of he's standing at the edge of his field in year 6, okay? He's watching a really good harvest come in. He's had 6 years of planting this harvest. He knows that next year he's supposed to walk away from that same ground and just let it sit untouched. That would be really hard to do, right? This is a family whose entire food supply all year, every single year, comes from what this ground produces. There's no store to walk into if the harvest fails. There's no backup system, right? It's just this field. It's this field and what God said that he had to do with it. Most people picture the Israelites, I think, you guys tell me if this is you, okay? But I think most of us picture the Israelites wandering through sand for 40 years, right? Because they're in a desert. So when I was reading this, I was like, where do they plant the fields? Like it's a desert. Did you ever imagine that? They're just wandering through sand for 40 years and assume that's just their whole world. It isn't though. Okay, once they're on, it isn't once they're on land. So this is the hillside terrace. It's farming, it's grain fields, it's vineyards, it's olive groves. It's actually an entire agricultural economy, thank you so much for that lives or dies by whether the harvest actually works. Okay, so when God says take a full year off, that's not a small ask. That's a lot. That's asking a family to trust him with their food supply on a schedule that they don't get to choose. So I think the thing that a lot of us tend to miss, and it kind of changes what how you read this whole instruction. Continuous farming, it strips nutrients out of the soil. So a field that ends up being worked every single year without rest eventually produces less. Isn't that interesting? If you continually go and tend to your field, if you do it continuously, it strips those nutrients out of the soil. And so eventually what happens is that it doesn't produce as much, no matter how hard you work it. Okay? So then it talks about the follow year. Oh, she told us that? That's beautiful. So what ends up happening is that you have to take a follow year, meaning that you need to let the ground actually recover. So this law was doing two things at once. Okay, it was teaching Israel to trust God with provision, and it was actually behind the scenes teaching, it was quietly protecting the exact resource that their whole survival was dependent on. I think that's so incredible, right? It's incredible that they didn't know. I'm sure some of them didn't even know that. But God was doing something for their good, even when it didn't feel like it. Their obedience wasn't asking them to sacrifice their future. Their obedience was actually protecting it. He was actually protecting it. This is the same principle of the land's rest. It actually gets picked back up in 2 Chronicles chapter 36, in verse 21. It's where the scripture says that the land finally enjoyed her Sabbaths. Isn't that cute? It finally enjoyed her Sabbaths. It enjoyed its rest. That was during the 70 years of exile. We're going to come back to that later in this chapter, because it answers one of the biggest questions that people actually ask about this passage. So I want to know, before we get into another part of it, can you guys answer this for me, true or false? True or false? You actually believe that rest could produce something for you, not just cost you time? True or false? Do you believe that rest can actually produce something for you, not just cost you time? Yep, it's very true. Rest is productive. I say that all the time. Rest is productive. Now, I want to say this too, because we've talked about the Sabbath a lot. And I knew obviously that this section, this study was going to be heavily based on the Sabbath. I'm going to be taking it from a different angle. I kind of struggled with how do I not just repeat everything that's already been said and relate it to a way that we've never heard it in our studies together. Not that you've never heard it before, but I pray that this invites you into something about rest that you haven't heard from me in the studies before. I want you to feel the weight of what God is actually offering here, not just the instruction. He's not asking Israel to prove that they can survive without the provision. He's promising provision before they ever even asked for it. It's attached to an act of obedience that they haven't performed yet. It's not a test that was designed for them. It's not designed to see if they're going to fail. It's a father building rest into the very system that his children depend on before they ever even knew that they actually needed it. So as we go through this, I want you to also think about this. What field or what area of your life have you been afraid to just leave alone and just let it rest? What's the one thing that you keep working year after year, convinced that if you even stopped for a second, it would just stop producing something together? You're kind of just white knuckling it. Is that parenting? You can put it in the chat if you want to. You don't have to. I just want you to think about it. Is it your marriage? Is it relationships? Your health? What are you holding on to? And you feel if I don't monitor every element of this, it's going to fail or it's going to fall. It's going to stop producing something altogether. I want you to think about this, and you can put it in the comments if you want to, if you're willing to, but just think about this as we go through this, because it doesn't look the same for everyone in the room, right? It could be some of us that are single and we're building a career, and it might be the belief that if you're not always the one staying late or saying yes to the extra project, somebody's going to take that opportunity that you're working towards. Or you're a new mom, and it might be the belief that you're not, if you're not the one who remembers everything, the diaper bag, the pediatrician appointment, the thank you notes, it all falls apart. So you just never let yourself fully rest or let anybody else manage it. Or a teenager, or a mom of teenagers, right? If you stop managing every single schedule, every conversation, they're going to drift. And you never stop monitoring long enough to just actually enjoy them. There's a lot of us living different things. Just think about that. Okay. I think so many of us have been working that same ground for years. We've been working it for so long that we've done it without a single season of actually resting. And I think we kind of confuse that with being disciplined. I don't think that's necessarily what it is. I think that's fear, but it's dressed up as discipline. I think that God built rest into the design before he ever built the harvest. And if you can't find a single season where you've let yourself just rest completely and trust him with that, with what happens next, I don't think that's proof of your work ethic. I think that's proof of what you actually believe about whether he'll come through without you pushing it. So some of us have decided that rest is for women whose lives are calmer than yours, right? You've told yourself that once the season is over, once the business stabilizes, or our kids are over, then I can actually lean into rest. But what this 7th year is actually telling us, what it's saying exactly in this passage, is that it wasn't offered to Israel once things calmed down. It was actually commanded in the middle of ongoing, demanding, unpredictable agricultural life. I think it's because God knew that if he waited for a convenient season, that season would just never come, right? We always say later, I just need one more week. And then I just need one more week to get caught up. And then that one more week doesn't happen, right? There's going to always be a reason that it's not the right time. That's not a modern day problem. It's just a human one, right? Because if God is talking about this thousands of years before we ever existed, that shows us that that's just more of a human problem. And God actually addresses it 3,000 years before we were the ones that were making that excuse to ourselves. So I think that some of us are afraid that if we actually rest, we're going to find out how much we've been carrying that wasn't necessary. Okay. So I'll read through verses, let's see, I was in verse 8. I think it's 8 through, sorry, give me one second, you guys. I took 5 billion notes. Okay. I'll read verses 8 through 13. Okay. This is the year of Jubilee. And you shall count 7 Sabbaths of years for yourself, 7 times 7 years. And the time of the 7 Sabbaths of years shall be to you 49 years. Then you shall cause the trumpet of Jubilee to sound on the 10th day of the 7th month. On the day of atonement you shall make the trumpet to sound throughout all your land. And you shall consecrate the 50th year, and proclaim liberty throughout the land to all its inhabitants. It shall be a jubilee for you, and each of you shall return to his possessions, and each of you shall return to his family. That 50th year shall be a jubilee to you. In it you shall neither sow nor reap what grows of its own accord, nor gather the grapes of your untended vine. For it is a jubilee, and it shall be holy to you. You shall eat its produce from the field. And in this year of Jubilee, each of you shall return to his possession. Teresa, I love that. So what's happening here is God actually adds another layer to it. He says, count 7 Sabbath years, 7 sets of 7, right? That's God's perfect number of completion, the number 7. That's 49 years. And then on the Day of Atonement in the 50th year, right? So the following year, that would be the 50th year, a trumpet sounds across the entire land. That trumpet announces the year of Jubilee. So that means that every unsettled debt gets released. Every person who sold themselves to service to survive, they go home free. Every single piece of land that was sold, it returns to the family that originally owned it. Okay? So the Hebrew word for this year is Yovel. That literally refers to the ram horn trumpet itself. So the year is actually named after the sound that it announces it. So in the New King James Version of Scripture, of verse 10, it actually says, proclaim liberty throughout all the land. And then when we look into the Message translation of it, it says, make it a holy year. Proclaim freedom for everyone. Okay, so it's the same instruction. But he's saying, make it holy. Make it holy, it actually pulls something forward that proclaim liberty. It can lose in the older phrasings. This isn't just a legal reset, it's a sacred one. Okay, so try to picture yourself hearing this trumpet. Like if you were the one in debt, or you're the one who sold yourself into someone else's household to survive, because I want you to also understand this. When we talk about slavery in this chapter, I want you to understand, we're going to go deeper into what it means, but that's what they did. They sold themselves into someone else's household because they needed to survive. And as I was studying this, one of the questions that I asked myself, I would love to show you guys my process sometimes. I'm like, why is this? Why did that happen? Anyway, one of the things that I was thinking is, imagine an Israelite. They just came from 400 years of slavery. Wouldn't that be weird for them to be enslaved again? We'll dive deeper into that, but I just want you to know that element of it, okay? So when you're picturing that trumpet, and you being the one that either sold yourself or you were in debt, you didn't petition for it. You didn't have to prove yourself, prove that you suffered enough or that you paid enough. That sound went across the entire country the same day, and it applied to you whether or not you believed it would or not. Like, it was just canceled. Everything that was owed was just gone. It was wiped clean. The slate was wiped clean. Like if you guys heard that trumpet sound today, canceling one thing you owe, or money or guilt or an old mistake, what would it be? If you could be like, if I could just wipe something clean right now, what would it be? Would it be like guilt over a relationship, guilt over something that you did to somebody else? It could be money. I feel like money is a pretty big one. Maybe a mindset that you have. I don't know. Maybe think about that. Maybe you guys will have some more clever answers. There's something that I feel like is actually really important underneath this to help us distinguish the two time frames very clearly. So we're talking about the Sabbath year. That's every 7 years. This is specifically about the land resting, okay? But in Deuteronomy chapter 15, it separately commands an actual debt release. That can actually occur on the 7th year cycle. So the Jubilee is the 50th year. The Sabbath is the 7th, every 7 years. And the Jubilee is on the 50th year. That is after 7 full cycles. 7 full cycles of Sabbath years. It's a bigger reset. The land actually returns back to its original family. And then anyone who's in servitude, they go free. So there's a debt release every 7 years and a full land and servitude rest every 50. These are two different mechanisms. They're two different rhythms, but they work together. So what actually happened to a debt when it got canceled? Because I was thinking about this. I was like, well, what happens to the people? Like, just imagine you're a business owner or you are somebody that had somebody that was enslaved to you. Like, where does it go? So what happens is the creditor, they just simply absorb the loss. Wouldn't that be cool if our credit card companies or like our student loans, they just absorb the loss? That'd be amazing. I wish that was still a thing today. Medical bills, like just, it's been 50 years, like we're just going to take the loss. I would love that. That'd be nice. Because at a certain point, it's like, how are we able to ever fulfill that debt that we owe sometimes? It just continues to accumulate. They simply absorb it. There's no shifting it somewhere else. There's no hidden fees, no future collection. It's just gone. And it's gone fully. The person that was owed money bore the loss themselves. It was by God's own design. It was as an act of obedience to him. So like, I'm going to answer this question because I feel like maybe some of you are like, well, why would that be okay for the creditor? Wasn't that like unfair to the person who was owed money? I want to reframe it for you so you can sit with this. In this system, everyone eventually stood on both sides of the equation. Okay, the same person who absorbed the loss, like this Jubilee, might have been the one that was released from a debt at least one other time, or they would be next. God wasn't asking just one group to bear all the risk while another group only benefited from it. He actually built an entire system where the whole nation took turns being the one who gave and the one who received. So it was so that generosity wasn't a one-directional sacrifice. It was a shared rhythm where eventually everybody ended up needing themselves. So nobody in Israel was wealthy enough or stable enough to assume that they'd never be on the receiving end of that mercy someday. So when we think about this in like modern times, like a modern version of this, what if like every 7 years your car loan or your student debt or your medical loans just got wiped and they were gone and forgiven? Because you filed the right paperwork or you qualified under the right program. Right? They were just gone. Not because you, sorry, I said that wrong. They were just gone. Not because you filed the right paperwork. They were just gone. They were gone because the calendar said so and it was guaranteed. And it was the same for everybody. Think about what that would actually do to how a person lives. You wouldn't take on debt, I think, the same way. You wouldn't stay in survival mode for decades over one medical year or like one failed business. An entire country's relationship with fear, with scarcity, with hoarding, it would actually look completely different if the release was scheduled instead of just hoped for, right? That's the case for why God actually mandated this in the first place. He wasn't just managing an economy. He was building an entire nation's psychology around the idea that need is temporary and provision is coming. So instead of the psychology that most of us actually carry now, which assumes that like debt and lack are permanent unless you personally fight your way out of it, I think that's how we live now. That's not what he wanted for us. I think the harder truth to name, or that is worth naming honestly, is we don't have that law today, and it shows. Our relationship with debt, with scarcity, with fear of like not having enough, it was actually shaped by the world that was built in a guarantee, that was never built into a guaranteed release, right? That doesn't mean that God has stopped caring about our provision, though. It means that the burden of proving that you'll be okay has fallen entirely on you in a way that it was never supposed to. I think that gap is part of, or like a big part of why so many of us live exhausted, why we live guarded, why so many of us are just like completely unable to rest when nothing is actively wrong. Like in the surrounding nations in Israel, the cultures of that region, debt cancellations happened sometimes, but they were royal favors and they were handed down whenever a king just felt generous. And it was usually at the start of his reign when he probably felt the most generous. Nobody could actually count on it. It wasn't a law, it was just his act of mercy. Oh, Grace, I love that. I'm over here thinking like, are you guys understanding what I'm saying? Because you're all so quiet. But Israel's version was actually the opposite. It was actually written into the calendar itself. It was guaranteed. It was guaranteed. It was never subject to anybody else's discretion. That's the difference between hoping someone might forgive what you owe and knowing the actual release date was already fixed before you ever borrowed anything. There's actually, you know what I find so interesting? There's actually no record anywhere in scripture that Israel ever actually carried this out. Not once. They didn't honor it. Isn't that so interesting? He mandated it, but there's nothing that shows that they actually did it. They never actually followed through with it. He said every 7 years you're going to rest, and every 50, the slate is wiped clean. They didn't do it. We don't do it today either. I know that's like, why is that okay? If God's presence was right there, why weren't they punished for ignoring it? Here's the most honest answer I could find, okay? They were punished. Not instantly, not individually, okay? But I want you to hold on to that. We're going to be coming back to this at the end of this section because I want to give it the full weight that it deserves, okay? I want to connect this straight to what a lot of us wrote earlier. Remember I asked you guys, I can't rest now because if I stop X, Y, Z, it's going to fall apart. Some of you guys put stuff in the comments. Some of you are like half asleep today. I asked you guys, what is the thing that if you where you feel in your life, if you were to stop, where does it feel like it would fall apart if you stopped managing it so much? Lily, it's good to see you. I don't know if she's still on, but I saw her name pop up. Can you guys tell Lily good morning, that we are praying over her and we miss her? Can you guys do that for me? If we were here in person, I feel like I would just come around all of you and give you a big hug. But some of you guys, I know that you needed a little extra. So I think a lot of us have been living our lives like there's no release date coming for us. No release date for the things that we're holding on to. Like whatever debt or mistake or failure or struggle that we're holding on to, we're still paying on something that has no scheduled end. But what I'm seeing here is that God didn't ask Israel to earn their way out one payment at a time before they qualified for the relief. Because he actually built that relief into the structure itself. He did it on schedule. It was on a schedule that he set. No one, not one person had to prove themselves into this schedule. Okay? None of us did. It's not earned. It's not earned. I think it shows up differently depending on where we're at in the seasons of our lives, right? If we're newly married, sometimes we might still be punishing ourselves for who we were before the relationship, and we bring in a guilt into our marriage that we were never asked to carry. Like, I came into this marriage and I just have massive amounts of debt. How can I do that? Or if you're a mom who lost her patience yesterday, it might be you might be replaying that moment all day long instead of receiving a reset, like resetting your morning in a different way. Or some of us are building businesses or rebuilding them after a really hard year. And I think some of us, we might be treating every decision through the lens of the mistake that cost us the last time instead of just giving ourselves a clean slate. Or for some of us that are in seasons of grief, we might be believing that we have to keep proving our love through suffering, as if it means, or as if moving forward means you don't care enough. It could be a different decade, different circumstances, but it's the same instinct, right? Keeping an account open that was already closed. Some of us are still making payments on something that God settled a really long time ago. We're still trying to earn it. We're still trying to hold our way to it. You keep that account open because closing it feels irresponsible to you. Like you'd be letting yourself off too easy. That's not humility. That's actually refusing a release that was never yours to refuse. Like that date was already set. You don't get to overrule it by staying in debt longer than what God required. I think that some of us have pretty quietly made peace with a permanent sense of owing, right? Because it's familiar, and familiar feels a lot safer than freedom, like a freedom that we're not sure kind of like how to hold on to. But I want you to think about it. If you've never lived in a season without a constant background feeling of, I owe something, freedom can actually feel very disorienting at first. Okay? Not relieving. It feels very disorienting. I want you to expect that. It feels very foreign to you. The absence of what you've been carrying might feel strange before it feels good. That is not evidence that the release is not real. That's not evidence that to me, that's evidence that you're just not used to carrying it in that way. Some of us are keeping that debt open on somebody else's behalf, not just your own. It could be a parent who never apologized to you. Maybe it's a friend who hurt you and they never made it right. And you decided until they pay what they owe, you'll hold that account open as proof of what actually happened mattered. But I want you to consider this. Holding that account open isn't punishing them nearly as much as it is keeping you tethered to something that God already has jurisdiction over. Okay? He's not asking you to pretend that it didn't happen. He's asking you whether you trust him enough to be the one who settles what you can't collect on your own. I think that for some of us, that debt that you're still paying is towards God himself. And for some of us, what we've done is we've decided that grace applies to other people's mistakes, but yours actually requires a little bit more proof that before you actually feel like you're allowed to feel forgiven. But I want to say this very plainly, okay? There's no extra ledger for you. This trumpet that God sounded for the entire nation of Israel, it sounded over the whole land. It sounded over theirs, and it's sounding over your specific failures or debts or thoughts or whatever it is that you're holding on to. So you're not the one exception to the release. Okay? But I want to fast forward roughly 900 years past this chapter. Okay? So if you have never studied this part of the Bible before, I'm going to give you a quick version of what you need to know. So after Israel eventually splits into two kingdoms, the southern kingdom, Judah spent generations drifting from what God commanded. They were worshiping other gods, okay? They were ignoring the prophets that God kept sending warning. They were ignoring the prophets that God kept sending to warn them. And yes, ignoring the Sabbath years and the Jubilee that we've spent studying all morning, okay? But eventually, the nation of Babylon invaded and they destroyed Jerusalem and the temple. Okay. And they carried the people off into exile into a foreign land for 70 years. So this isn't just a historical footnote in here. It was the most devastating thing that had happened to God's people since Egypt, since losing their land, their temple, their home, everything in Leviticus 25, everything that we just spent, or that Leviticus 25 spends an entire chapter promising would stay secure. Generation after generation had skipped the Sabbath years. Okay, so remember when I told you, like, how did they do that and they didn't get in trouble? Eventually it caught up to them. The land never got rest, and nobody sounded the trumpet. In 2 Chronicles chapter 36, verse 21, it says plainly that the land finally enjoyed her Sabbaths. That actually ties directly to the 70 years of exile itself, to fulfill the 70 years. There's a lot of scholars that actually connect the 70-year number to generations of unobserved Sabbath, and they were all finally being collected at once. What we'll see tomorrow in Leviticus 26, it lays out exile as one of the specific covenant consequences for exactly this kind of long-term neglect. So the honest answer to why Israel wasn't punished is that they were. It was just on a longer timeline than any single generation could see. That consequence didn't just disappear because it wasn't immediate. It just arrived later, and it arrived collectively. And that land, it got its rest either way, whether the people gave it willingly or it had to be taken by force. But I want to show you about who God actually is. Okay? He is not a God who forgets what he's owed and then just lets it go. He's not a God who explodes the second that something's missed. He is patient across generations in a way that should terrify you and comfort you so much at the same time. Okay? His justice is real, and it is also unhurried. He doesn't need to punish you today to prove that he noticed. He is the same God. He is patient and exact, and he is watching over what's his long after you stop tracking it yourself. I think that we should give him glory for that, because he keeps a better record than what we do, and he's more patient with us than what we deserve. But I think it's almost like this idea, too, of because they didn't want to be obedient, they kind of did it to themselves, if that makes sense. They didn't honor it, so it caught up with them. I think of it like this. When I don't rest, when I keep going and I push past my limits, it catches up to me. I don't want to blame him for that, because that's me. I'm the one that ultimately didn't honor his guidance. He shows me, hey, just do this. If you keep the commands that I give you, it's beneficial for you. You bear the fruits of it. But if you don't, you're not going to experience the fullness of what I have to offer you, and it will catch up to you. But I can't let it go on for so long that it's kind of like sin, right? We know that when we continue to live in sin, it doesn't just affect us, it starts to affect others. And it's like this weed that takes root, and then it starts affecting all the other surrounding beautiful flowers. After so long, you have to pluck that weed out of the garden so that it doesn't continue. I almost think of it like that. Okay. So when we move into, I'll read verses 14 through 22. And I know that I'm spending a lot of time in between verses, but that's intentional. It's very intentional, because I really want us to see. I actually think when I wrote Leviticus 26 and 27 as well, I'm spending more time in these verses trying to get it back to us and to him, even more so than what we have in the past. So when we go through, I'll go through verses 14 through 17. Thank you so much for that. Verses 14 through 17. Where'd you go? Okay. So it says, "And if you sell anything to your neighbor or buy from your neighbor's hand, you shall not oppress one another. According to the number of years after the Jubilee, you shall buy from your neighbor, and according to the number of years, the crops he shall sell to you. According to the magnitude of years, you shall increase its price, and according to the fewer numbers of years, you shall diminish its price. For he sells to you according to the number of the years of the crops. Therefore, you shall not oppose one another, but you shall fear your God, for I am the Lord your God. I missed you all yesterday. I missed you all, but I had the most amazing time. I love going to get my hair done. Fun fact, my hairstylist, Renee, she's more than that, but that's what you guys would know her as. If I just said Renee, you'd be like, who's that? Renee has been my hairstylist since I was 11, so over 20 years. And I don't see her every 8 weeks like I should. Thank you guys for that. But when I get to spend the day with her, it's just the best. I bought us lunch, and she is one of my oldest friends. One of my oldest friends. And it is a blessing to just get to catch up with her, and we swap advice, and it's just her and I in the salon. So that's always fun. But it was a good reset. It's always so good to see her because she's been a part of every big moment. Doing my hair for my wedding. She's the one who, when my mom, it's so cute because when we moved here, she was like, when I was in school, people used to kind of like make fun of my hair because it was so curly. And my mom, bless her. I mean, I'm a little mixed girl, and my mom doesn't have textured hair. So she's like, please, can anybody help me, with her hair? And so Renee taught me how to do my hair, and she's always celebrated it and embraced it. And she's like, Vanessa, your hair's so healthy. It could hold this blonde. Because I always tell her, I'm like, Renee, please don't do it if it's going to not be good for my hair, right? She's just one of those stylists. And she's like, no, I would not let you, but your hair can hold it. And I was like, yay. So she is family. She is family. She also does my brother-in-law's hair because she doesn't normally do men's hair. She does my brother-in-law's hair. She's very select with whose hair she does. But I know that I missed you all yesterday, but it was so needed for me. So thank you guys for understanding. It was so needed on multiple levels. I was like, Renee, please hide all my gray hairs. They're getting unruly. I have like 7,000 of them, so make them blend in. So I'm gonna unpack verses 14 through 17. I think they get very practical very fast. So essentially what they're saying is when you buy or sell land, the price has to be based on how many years remain until the next Jubilee. Thank you, guys. How many years remain until the next Jubilee since the land returns to its original family anyway? So like in verse 17 of the New King James Version of Scripture, it says it very plainly. You shall not oppress one another, right? But the Message translation, it says it even more directly. It says no exploiting your neighbor. So then in verses 18 through 20, it's going to answer that question very head on. Okay, so in verses 18 through 20, it says, you shall observe my statutes and keep my judgments and perform them, and you will dwell in the land in safety. Then the land will yield its fruit, and you will eat your fill and dwell there in safety. And if you say, what shall we eat in the 7th year, since we shall not sow nor gather in our produce? Then I will command my blessing on you in the 6th year, and it will bring forth produce enough for 3 years. And you shall sow in the 8th year and eat old produce until the 9th year, until its produce comes in, and you shall eat of the old harvest. This one answers it very head on. If we don't plant in the 7th year, what do we eat, right? God says, you know what? I understand that fear. It's a very real fear. But I will command a blessing in the 6th year, enough for 3 years. Enough for 3 years so then they can plant again in the 8th year and still eat while that new crop grows. But I want you to think about the fear underneath this question, okay? Because this is not an abstract anxiety that they have. This is a farming family looking at their only food source and being told to stop working it. It's like me telling you to stop going to work for a whole year. Don't do any work for a whole year. Are you going to trust that your bills are going to be paid, that there's going to be food on the table? Without a backup plan, no storage system, nothing but a promise, right? That fear shows up in the body before it ever shows up in the words, right? It shows up as anxiety. You're like, God, I love you, but I don't think I can do that. So here's a fact worth knowing, okay? God didn't promise enough for 1 year to cover the year of rest. He promised enough for 3. He was covering the rest of the year. And then the following year, while the new crop grew its harvest to size, okay? His provision wasn't just the bare minimum required to survive. It came with margin built in. Where have we seen that elsewhere in Scripture? Not only does he say it, but he does it. He shows it to us. He shows it to us with the loaves of bread, right? When he turns the loaves and the fish and they feed the 5,000. Yep, we see it in the book of Job. Where he takes everything that Job lost and does he double it or triple it? He doubles it, at least. He says, I will bless you times 1,000, 10 times, tenfold. He says tenfold. We see it when he turns the water into wine. He doesn't just provide what's given to just supply the wedding. He gives them an abundance. And he's showing us that here. If they follow his mandate, if they follow his instruction, his provision will not just be the bare minimum. He's going to bless them more than what they need. How many of you have experienced that in your lives? I have. When I just release the thing that I'm trying to hold on to, he takes it and he multiplies it in ways that I could never have. It may not happen immediately. Like, he's not a genie that I wish, I rub the bottle and then I make a wish and he blesses it and blesses it abundantly. It happens on his schedule and if it's in accordance to his will. But if he's asking me to surrender it, that means that he has something in store for it that I never could. That he's not just going to make me release something and then nothing happened with it. I mean, there are elements of it too. Like, even as I say that, there have been times where he's like, just trust me. It's not always going to turn out how you think, but I have something better in store for you. So I'm going to ask you guys this question, A, B, or C, because I'm going to wake you back up. What's harder for you guys to trust God with right now? Is it A, your finances? Is it B, your time? Or is it C, your body? Now, when I say your body, I want you to, there are probably things going on physically that sometimes you haven't surrendered to him. So A, your finances, B, your time, or C, your body. Mine is A. Mine is A 100%. I won't deny that. D, all of the above. You guys always give a separate, I should have a other. Like if it were a multiple choice thing on the test. You always write in your own answer. I love it. I want to connect this straight to what a lot of us actually do instead of resting. Okay. When you're afraid there won't be enough, you don't take a year off. And if you guys have, please let me know your secret on how to surrender fully to just take a year off. I have met people that are like, you know what? I took it off and I just followed him. You know what? I can say that, but I actually told my husband this. I said, babe, can we trust that the Lord is going to do something with our obedience? Give me a year. I actually did say that. I said, please just give me a year. I'm going to build this business. And I know that it will produce something. I know that he's blessing us. But can we give it a year at least? Just 1 year. I won't provide. Will you be the provider for a year? Can we do that? So I've said it, I guess. I've surrendered that. And I said, I'm going to offload all of my clients that I previously had to follow this direction that he's called me to. Will we be okay? And he said, we will be fine. We will make it work, right? We will trust in him. And so we have most days. He trusts sometimes more than what I do. Right? Yes. And because of that obedience, I get the pleasure of being with you guys today. I still do it. It's not a previous, I coach, I'm a brand and market strategist, and I coach other faith-driven female entrepreneurs. But I stopped serving clients in one capacity and stepped more fully into what I'm doing now. I coach other faith-driven female entrepreneurs, but it's a different setting. I don't execute. I don't create websites, logos, marketing plans. I don't do that part of it. I don't do graphic designs. It's just different. I surrendered all of that. The high-paying clients, and more of the hands-on work, essentially. So back to where I was telling you guys. Essentially, why we do this is when you're afraid there's not going to be enough, you don't usually just take off. A lot of times you keep planting every single angle. You keep saying yes past your own capacity, not because you're a bad steward, but because some part of you doesn't believe that provision is actually coming if you stop moving. That's why we do that. That's fear doing exactly what it's built to do. But the problem is that constant output was never designed to be the thing that it was never the thing that God designed to provide for you. Rest was. So I want you guys to take note of the areas that you've been overfunctioning in specifically. Overfunctioning because you don't trust that enough is coming if you stop. Okay. I think some of us are working like 3 years worth of effort into a single year because we've never let ourselves believe that God's provision could actually cover a season where we produced nothing. It doesn't even need to be in the monetary sense. Sometimes we worry enough for 10 people about our health, about relationships. We're taking on more for our family. We're doing more. And it's enough for like 5 people, right? I think that some of us don't believe that fully that somebody else is going to step in, that God is actually going to reward or show up and help those other people. Some of us, I think we do it because we feel like if we don't, the other person's going to fall. That's not the world's version of a strong work ethic. That, for a lot of times, is a person who's never let themselves test whether God actually meant what he said. Test that. Think about that. If you have anxiety over doctor appointments, dentist appointments, and you worry, I think a lot of times that's a woman who's never let herself test whether God actually meant what he said, that he is healer, right? For those of us that worry and stress and overwork in business, do we believe that he's provider? A lot of times that's us never letting ourselves fully test it because we try to own it on our own. Or a family member who takes on more. You handle other people's finances, you handle childcare, you handle pickups, you handle all these other things because you want your family to be successful. But have you ever let God swoop in and take hold of it for you? He says, my yoke is easy and my burden is light. Remember that yoke means that you're not meant to hold it on your own. But some of us are white knuckling it to the point where we're not even allowing him to step in. And I think that if some of us would actually be relieved to stop, right? But if we would be relieved to stop if we believed for 1 second it was safe to. I think for some of us that feel like that, that's worth sitting with because it means that the exhaustion wasn't actually the problem. It's the fear underneath it that is. You're not tired because you don't know how to rest. You're tired because you never trusted the provision enough to try it. And I think that some of us have learned this pattern very honestly, not out of just nowhere, right? Maybe we grew up watching someone who never stopped. We watched somebody who just kept going and going and going, and it taught you that stopping is what irresponsible people do. Or maybe in an earlier season of your life, it genuinely did fall apart when you weren't the one holding on to it. And what happened is that you never let yourself separate that one experience from every single situation since. I'm not asking you to pretend that history doesn't exist or pretend it away. I'm asking you to consider what the God who promised 3 years of provision for 1 year of obedience is actually asking you to. He's not asking you to relive that same collapse. I believe what he's doing is he's asking you to test him in a specific current season, not to prove your past fear was wrong. I think he wants you to find out what he actually does with your trust today. And don't just put that into just business. It isn't just about business or a bank account at all. It's about your body, to keep pushing through exhaustion, through pain, through seasons that you know that you need to slow down in, because rest was never once felt like it was allowed to apply to you specifically. But I want you to hear this part of it. This same God who commanded an entire nation's economy to pause, he is not less concerned with your body than what he was with their soil. Okay? So for those of you that are just coming in, we're in Leviticus 25 right now. For some of us, a lot of us are naming real things in the comments about what we can't stop producing, like what we can't just surrender at God's feet. I invite you guys to stay with me because we're gonna get to the verse that names ownership very directly, and I feel like it's gonna answer a lot of what's coming up right now. So I'm gonna read through verses 23 through 28. The land shall not be sold permanently, for the land is mine. For you are strangers and sojourners with me. And in all the land of your possession you shall grant redemption of the land. If one of your brethren becomes poor and has sold some of his possession, and if his redeeming relative comes to redeem it, then he may redeem what his brother sold. Or if he may redeem what his brother sold, or if the man has no redemption to it, but he himself becomes able to redeem it, then let him count the years since its sale, and restore the remainder to the man whom sold it, that he may return to his possession. But if he is not able to have it restored to himself, then what was sold shall remain in the hand of him who bought it until the year of Jubilee, and in the Jubilee it shall be released, and he shall return to his possession. So, what's happening essentially here, when I want to focus on verse 23, okay? Verse 23 says, the land shall not be permanently sold, for the land is mine, says the Lord, for you are strangers and sojourners with me. In the Message translation, it says it like this: the land is mine, and you are just tenant farmers that are working for me. Even after the generations that lived there, ownership was never actually theirs. They were tenants by his grace. Okay, we are in Leviticus 25, and I just read verses 23 through 28. Then when we look at verses 25 through 28, those actually lay the redemption law. It says that if someone else ended up poor and had to sell their land, their nearest relative had both the right and the responsibility to buy it back for them. So if nobody could redeem it, the land still returned automatically at Jubilee either way. So when we look at this, envision like a family and their land actually got sold off, and it was sold off out of desperation. Imagine your house got repossessed, okay? It got repossessed out of desperation. And knowing full well that it wasn't a permanent loss because either a relative would step in or the Jubilee would eventually bring it back regardless. That's a completely different emotional experience than losing something forever, right? If you knew that your house, you were desperate, you didn't have the funds right now, you were going through an incredibly difficult season, and you knew eventually it would come right back around to you, you handle that differently. But we don't have that opportunity to, right? We don't. A lot of us, there's grief. For some of us, there's panic. But in this situation, it wouldn't be any of those things. It's actually staying in that family day to day for a minute. I want you to imagine the father that's walking the boundary line of what used to be his field. And it's now being worked by somebody else's hands. And instead of that walk being soaked in shame, it kind of carries this same strange sense of like peace. And it does it because he knows the exact terms of when this other person possessing the field, he knows when that's going to end. He can tell his children that it's not gone. It's just held for right now. That's so different than what we live in right now. It's incredible to me. Like, could you imagine what things would be like if we actually honored what Scripture said? Like the whole world, the whole society. Imagine how different we would operate as individuals. Like he could watch another family harvest what used to be his, and he would feel it without the bitterness that actually comes from the permanent loss. Okay? He would be able to watch it so differently. I think it's because permanent was never actually on the table in that way. But when we compare it to how loss actually feels for us now, when something is taken, there's no promise of return, right? There's no promise of return. Grief kind of turns into something harder over time. A lot of times it turns into resentment, to hopelessness, sometimes anger. This family, they didn't have to carry that. The law itself protected their hope. I think the part that's actually one of the more important pieces, I want to really slow down on this one. Imagine if this had been lived out as it is today. Okay? Generation after generation, exactly as God designed it. No family in Israel could have stayed poor forever. No family could have accumulated so much land that everybody else became permanently dependent on them. Every single 50 years, the entire nation's wealth and their land reset closer to just like an even. It wasn't by force or rebellion, but by obedience. And then you multiply that across generations, you'd have a society with no permanent underclass, no generational poverty passed down like an inheritance. No family who could say, we've been struggling since our great-grandfather's day, and we'll be struggling until our great-grandchildren's, right? That's what obedience to this chapter could have actually produced. It could have been sustained across nation. It could have been over like hundreds of years. God didn't just offer relief to individuals. He offered a different kind of society. And the fact that it is never fully lived out, I think it's one of the quieter tragedies of the whole Old Testament. The fact that we could have had things so differently if we would have just obeyed. And I give them grace because I'm like that today too. I don't obey. I don't follow every single commandment. Rest and Sabbath and not working and holding things and like resetting and all of those things, I don't honor them perfectly. So I can understand why some of those things can be really hard, especially with the trust and trusting that He'll provide. So nowadays, we have that. We have the fullness of the Bible. Thank you for that. They were just getting to know God, right? They had never experienced Him. They had experienced Him as provider, right? He provided the manna. He delivered them. Their entire identity was being reset. So what I want to say too is that doesn't happen overnight, and that He gives us grace. But I think ultimately, if we don't honor it, it's not His doing, it's ours. And so many people are so quick to say, God put me here. God did this to me. There are some seasons where He does take us through things. But how much of it is actually Him when we find ourselves in difficult situations? The Hebrew word for the relative that was responsible for buying back what was lost, it's actually translated as kinsman redeemer or family guardian. So this wasn't a stranger just doing a favor. It was an expected family role. It was an expected family role, including buying back lost land and providing an heir for a relative who passed away without one. And in some cases, avenging a relative's blood if they were wrongly killed. So this exact concept It becomes the foundation for how the New Testament describes Christ. Not someone who simply forgives from a distance, but he's a redeemer. He's someone who pays what you couldn't pay. He's someone who brings back something that you have no way of recovering on your own. In Psalm chapter 24, verse 1, it says, "The earth is the Lord's, and the fullness thereof." It is the same ownership claim, but it's echoed generations later. I feel like this is an obvious answer, but I want to give you something to think about, okay? And just to answer yes or no to. How many of you have ever tried to fix something or like save yourself out of something that you probably shouldn't have, that you probably shouldn't have let someone else help with? Like you've tried to fix or save yourself out of something that you probably should have let someone else help with, but you try to just do it on your own. Yes, I've done that, or no, I can't think of a time. We'll come back to that, okay? But I just want you to think of that. I tend to think of ownership and false burden colliding actually most directly in this chapter. Because God actually tells Israel, he tells Israel before they even build their first house on this ground that it was never fully yours to control. He says, you're managing this land. You didn't create it. You don't ultimately own it. And when he says that, to me, that framing kind of changes everything about how we carry what's in front of us. Because when we believe that something is fully ours, every day we don't push on it like it's, it feels like risk. When we understand that it's something that we steward and it belongs to someone else, when we rest, it stops being reckless. It actually becomes trust in the actual owner. I kind of like the best example that comes to mind right now. I think of like being an auntie to my nieces, because I only have nieces. All of our siblings only have girls, and we only have boys, which is very interesting. But anyway, my time with them, I'm like, yay, I get to love on you and play, but like you're going back to your parents. I'm not responsible for everything that happens to you. Yes, in this moment, I'm tending to you and caring for you, but ultimately you're going to go back to your owner, right? You get to go back. I tend to and I enjoy those moments even more so, but I don't put the full weight on everything that happens in their lives on me, but I do my best in these moments when I'm with them, and then the full own. I mean, yes, there's a part of their upbringing that is a piece of mine, but does that kind of make sense? You don't take on the weight of everything, because you're stewarding it, but you don't own it. I kind of think about that, especially in business. In these moments where I feel like I'm struggling, I'm like, I am just a steward. He is the owner of my life. It's my job to actively participate in it, but it is not mine to hold on to every single element of everything. I can't control every single thing that happens in my day, or in my life, or in my business. Okay. So I'm going to read through verses, where did we stop? I'll read through verses 29 through 46. Okay, so 29 through 46. If a man sells a house in a walled city, then he may redeem it within a whole year after it's sold. Within a full year he may redeem it. But if it is not redeemed within the space of a full year, then the house in the walled city shall belong permanently to him who bought it throughout his generations, and it shall not be released in the Jubilee. However, the houses of villages which have no walls around them shall be counted as the fields of the country. They may be redeemed, and they shall be released to the Jubilee. Nevertheless, the cities of the Levites and the houses in the cities of their possession, and the Levites may redeem at any time. And if a man purchases a house from the Levites, then the house that was sold in the city of his possessions shall be released in the Jubilee. For the house and the cities of the Levites are their possession among the children of Israel. But the field of the common land of their cities may not be sold, for it is their perpetual possession. If one of your brethren becomes poor and falls into poverty among you, then you shall help him like a stranger or a sojourner that may live with you, Take no usury or interest from him. But fear your God, that your brother may live with you, and you shall not lend him your money for usury, nor lend him your food at a profit. I am the Lord your God, who brought you out of the land of Egypt, to give you the land of Canaan, and to be your God. And if one of your brethren who dwells by you becomes poor and sells himself to you, you shall not compel him to serve as a slave. As a hired servant and a sojourner, he shall be with you, and shall serve you until the year of Jubilee. And then he shall depart from you, and he and his children with him shall return to his own family, and he shall return the possessions of his fathers. For they are my servants whom I brought out of the land of Egypt. They shall not be sold as slaves. You shall not rule over him with rigor, but you shall fear your God. And as for your male and female slaves whom you have from the nations that are around you, from them you may buy male and female slaves. Moreover, you may buy the children of the strangers who dwell among you and their families who are with you, which they beget in your land, and they shall become your property, and you may take them as inheritance for your children after you, to inherit them as possession. They shall be your permanent slave. But regarding your brethren, the children of Israel, you shall not rule over one another with vigor. Now if a sojourner or stranger close to you becomes rich, and one of your brethren who dwells with him becomes poor, and sells himself to the stranger or sojourner close to you, or to a member of the stranger's family, after he is sold, he may be redeemed again. One of his brothers may redeem him, or his uncle's son may redeem him, or anyone who is kin of him and his family may redeem him, or if he is able, he may redeem himself. Okay. So, verses 29 through 34. Okay, I'll focus on that first grouping. They actually get specific about property. So a house that is built inside of a walled city could only be redeemed within 1 year. And then after that, it belonged to the buyer. Okay, not returning even at Jubilee. So a house in an unwalled village, it counted as part of the open field, and it returned at Jubilee like farmland did. So the Levites, okay, they're a tribe that is set apart for priestly service. They got a permanent exemption. I can't speak, you guys. A permanent exception. Their property in the Levite cities could always be redeemed at any time, since their cities were only their inheritance. When we look through verses 35 all the way to 38, it turns to those individuals that were poor. So in the New King James verse of 35, it says, if one of your brethren becomes poor, you shall help him, right? But in the Message translation, it says, if your brother becomes destitute and cannot support himself, help him. Even if he's a foreigner or a stranger, help him. Okay. And then verse 36, it says, charging him interest is treated as a sin, not just poor judgment. It's a sin. Don't charge him interest for helping him. Then in verses 39 through 46, it addresses servitude very directly. It says, if a fellow Israelite becomes so poor that they sold themselves into service, God says, don't treat him as a slave, but as a hired servant. And then he's released at Jubilee. So verse 43, it says, you shall not rule over him with rigor, but you shall fear your God. Verses 44 through 46, what they do is they permit acquiring servants from surrounding nations. This is a different category with a different treatment, but essentially what you're doing is picturing the difference between these categories kind of on the ground, okay? It's a walled city house. When it was sold, it was closer to commerce. It was like tied to trade and business. A village house was tied to a farmland that a family actually lived off of. So these walled city houses, that's kind of like business in a sense. It's commerce. Thank you. when you have a village city house or a village house, that's attached to farmland that the family actually lives on. So a widow in this culture with no paid work that was generally available to women, she had almost no path to income at all. At all, unless somebody actually stepped in and helped her. Neither did anybody who was seriously disabled in a farming or shepherding economy that was built on physical labor. They didn't have any work. So if the community didn't help them, no other help was coming. So this is essentially what it's saying. Look at these individuals who can't help themselves. Help them. Don't take advantage of them. When we look into Leviticus, like back to chapter 19, verses 9 and 10, and then in verses 23 through 22, as well as Deuteronomy chapter 24, verses 19 through 21, they are all pouring this same direction. Permanent poverty was never supposed to exist in Israel. The whole system that God designed, and the land and the redemption and the Jubilee and the interest-free help, it was designed so nobody stayed stuck forever. I wish that still applied. What do you tend to be? Are you someone who tends to overgive, or do you under ask for help? You could be both too. Do you overgive or do you under ask? What do you guys tend to be? I'm going to take a drink and I'm going to mute while you guys do that. No more ASMR, you guys. I want to be honest about the servitude section. Okay, because it actually deserves real weight, not just a quick pass. So remember how I told you all, like, okay, but how can they be placed into servitude? Wouldn't that be really hard on them after they've spent over 400 years in that place? So forced labor, right? The slavery across the surrounding cultures and eras of that region, that was normal. It was actually deeply embedded into their economic reality, okay? God's law, it did not invent that system. It actually stepped into this world where it already existed everywhere. That was just a part of their culture. Like, that was a part of the world at that time. It existed everywhere, and it was regulated in so many ways that were genuinely different than the cultures around Israel. So these Hebrew servants specifically had protections almost nowhere else, like that wasn't offered anywhere else. They participated in religious festivals, and they rested on the Sabbath with everybody else in the household. They could not be treated with casual cruelty, and they had a guaranteed release date that no other system in the world provided. Scripture never once calls slavery good. It is never called God's design. So there's a lot of, I've done debates, and there's a lot of people who use that as the, well, why did God allow for slavery? Why did God allow for these things to happen? He liked it. He designed it. He didn't. He didn't. There's an element of free will. That's what the world was doing at that time. He actually shows a way out of it. This servitude that you're seeing is not slavery. He actually put parameters on what it meant. It was meant to help those who were in need. Think about this. I want you guys to envision this. When you are in a place of need, would you rather continually just get handout after handout after handout? Or do you feel a little bit better when you're able to participate in getting the restitution or relief? Whether it's financially, like in monetary form, or physical labor or whatnot. I think a lot of us, that gives us a level of confidence that we're participating in it, versus it just being a continual handout after handout. He created a system that allowed for people to participate in the help without it just kind of taking away parts of their identity. It never once there's nowhere in Scripture that he condones actual slavery in its purest form is brutal. It's awful. It's demeaning. It's so many things. Why would he ever condone that? The servitude, that's different. If I said, so some of you clean houses, right? I'm hiring in help. I can't maintain my own home, right? So what I do is I call in help. Somebody who's willing to do it. In their case, it was a little bit different in that time. They were provided with housing. Or like you know what I kind of think of it? You know how we have, I think they're called an apar? I can't remember what they're called. They're these nannies that will come into your house, but they live with you. And in return, you're providing them housing and food. And they're providing care for your children, right? It's that similar concept. You're not keeping them in a dungeon, locked away, and sometimes freeing your feeding them, right? It's not that. And then there was always an end date. With slavery, there wasn't. You worked and you did, you just kept going and going and going. There was no end date. That was just part of who you were. People confuse those two things a lot. And it's that lack of knowledge of actual scripture. So now if somebody ever says that to you, you guys now you can be equipped with that. Okay? God never called to that. He doesn't condone slavery. He doesn't approve of it. He freed Egypt out of slavery. So how can you tell me that he was for it, but he took an entire nation of millions of people out of it? Does that even make sense? No. It regulates, what God is doing in this is he is regulating, in this system, it creates a real brutal, he's regulating a real brutal existing system. Okay, that's just what existed in the world at this time. He's doing it in a way that consistently pushes towards more dignity and more freedom than anywhere else around in the surrounding nations. He freed them and he restored their identity and their dignity. Why would he do that if he condoned slavery? I want you to notice that this isn't incidental, okay? Israel had just come out of slavery in Egypt themselves. They knew exactly what it felt like to say no over to have no say over their body, have no say over their time. God's instruction over and over again is this: because you know what it felt like, do not repeat it to someone else. That's what he's doing in this section. When he's talking about if you're going to bring someone else, you know what it feels like to be in a position of need. You know what it feels like to be mistreated, to have no say over your time and your body. Do not do that to someone else. But I want to be honest with you all about something for a lot of us who are in this room. I think a lot of us live with this without ever naming it. Some of us give and we give and we give. A lot of us pass what our own family or our health or our business can actually absorb, and we call that generosity, right? Because I saw so many of us say that we overgive. We tend to overgive. We call that generosity when in reality it's the same fear driving it. If I give enough, I'll have proven that I deserve to be helped too. Have you guys ever felt that? If I keep giving and giving and giving, I'm earning my way into being helped. Maybe when I'm in a position of need because I've helped so much, maybe then they'll reciprocate it. I have to prove that I'm worthy enough to be helped. But I want you to look at what verse 35 says. It says, if your brother, someone within your actual reach, right? Not every need everywhere all at once, right? Obedience here is very specific. It's bounded. It's sustainable. It's not ensuring yourself. Like, essentially what it's saying is that you don't have to earn your way into that. Okay? I think that there's a lot of us that are more comfortable being the one who helps than the one who is helped. I think a lot of times it's because being helped, it feels like admitting that you couldn't carry it on your own. But God's instruction was never it was never a call to erase yourself, to disappear in helping other people. It was bounded on purpose. It was bounded in the exact way real obedience was supposed to be. I think so many of us, though, we learned really early that our value inside of the rooms that we were standing in, it was tied to how useful we could be, right? Maybe you were the responsible one in your family growing up, the one who kept the peace, the one who noticed what everybody else needed before they even asked. That's beautiful that you do this, right? But what happens is that it can quietly turn into a belief that you're only safe or only loved when you're giving something. If that's you, because that was me for a long time, I want you to hear this, okay? You were never meant to earn your place at the table by how much you provide for everyone else. You already have a seat there. Okay. I also think that some of us avoid receiving help because we don't trust the person offering it to actually follow through. So then what happens is that feels safer to just do it, like just do it ourselves, than to risk being let down. That's a real wound too. I don't want to minimize that. I've experienced that. But what I do want to do, I want to gently ask you this, okay? Is that protecting you or is it isolating you? Because God built an entire system in this chapter around people needing each other, and He did it on purpose. It was on purpose by design, not as a failure of independence. So if you're somebody who's made yourself the only reliable one in every single relationship that you are in, I'm going to tell you with all the care, that is not a strength, okay? That is a burden that you were never meant to hold by yourself. And for some of you, that is giving. That giving, it has become a way of avoiding your own need. So as long as you're the one that is meeting everyone else's needs, you never have to sit in the discomfort of admitting that you have a need as well. But I want you to consider that same God who commanded rest for the land, He also commanded help for the poor. And if you're allowed to be counted among the people that this chapter was written to protect, you are allowed that. It wasn't just written to protect it wasn't just written to the people that it was commanded to give. Okay. He didn't just write it to the Israelites back 3,000 years prior. He didn't just mandate it for the poor people who had no money. He mandated it for us. He writes a law. He writes a law in here that recognizes that we all have needs. Okay. So if you guys are just joining, we're covering a lot of ground right now in Leviticus 25. It is the land law. It is the poor and the servitude. What's underneath all of this is the same question that we kind of opened up with. I asked you all when you first came in, and this applies to all of you that are just joining now. What have you been carrying that was never fully yours to carry? Is it the financial burden? Is it the anxiety over your health? So many different things, right? So in verses 47 through 55, it's getting so dark in here. See how I changed colors? When I first started, it was really bright. I think my camera's adjusting, but now it's really dark and I can almost not see my Bible in here. So I'll read verses 47 through 55. Now, if a sojourner or stranger close to you becomes rich, and one of your brethren who dwells by him becomes poor and sells himself to the stranger or sojourner close to you, or to a member of the stranger's family, after he is sold, he may be redeemed again. After he is sold, he may be redeemed again. One of his brothers may redeem him, or his uncle's son may redeem him, or anyone who is near of kin to him and his family may redeem him. Or if he is able, he may redeem himself. Thus he shall reckon with him who bought him. The price of his release shall be according to the number of years from the year that he was sold to him until the year of Jubilee. It shall be according to the time of a hired servant for him. If there are still many years remaining, according to them, he shall repay the price of his redemption from the money with which he was bought. I feel like I need to go like this with my candle. I'm going to go old school because I can't see a single thing. And if there remaining but a few years until the year of Jubilee, then he shall reckon with him, and according to his years he shall repay him with the price of his redemption. He shall be with him as a yearly hired servant, and he shall not rule with vigor over him in your sight. And if he is not redeemed in these years, then he shall be released in the year of Jubilee, he and his children with him. For the children of Israel are servants to me. They are my servants whom I brought out of the land of Egypt. I am the Lord your God. I know it doesn't look dark. It's because my camera is adjusting to the lighting, which thank goodness. I feel like I'm living in those times where like you had to carry a lantern everywhere. How did they read? Because I'm trying to read this, right? I'm trying to read this and my light is going like this. So it's hard to like fully see the words. I don't know how they did it. I wish you guys could actually see how dark it is in here though. Thank goodness. That shows you how good my camera is at compensating. It's probably bumped all the way up to like 5,000. You guys probably don't know what camera settings are, but they're probably bumped all the way up. So this chapter actually closes with one more scenario. It is an Israelite that is so poor that they sold themselves not to a fellow Israelite, but to a foreigner living among them. Okay? Even then they retained the right of redemption. Any relative could actually buy them back at any time, and they were priced fairly by years remaining, the years that they had remaining until the Jubilee. And if nobody came in and redeemed them, they were still set free automatically at Jubilee. Because when we look at verse 35 in the New King James Version of the scripture, it says, "For the children of Israel are servants to me. They are my servants, whom I brought out of the land of Egypt. I am the Lord your God." Think about that. Think about that closing line and what it's actually doing. So every person in Israel, no matter how far they'd fallen into debt or servitude, they belonged to God first. They belonged to him first. It was not whoever currently held their contract. They belonged to him. It wasn't the circumstances that put them there. They belonged to him. Can you guys finish this for me? Before anything else, I belong to who? Before anything else, who do you belong to? I'm going to wait, and I'm going to invite as many of you that are willing to do that. Before anything else, I belong to who? I just want to see what fills the room. They belong to him first, just as we do, right? That is where our worth is found. That is where our value is found. That is where every part of us is found, is through him. Not through our circumstances, our finances, our relationship status, not our parental status. It belongs to him. No situation, no debt, no foreign master could make that ownership permanent for them. God's claim on them, it outranked every other claim. Thank you for that. Every other claim that could have ever been made on their life. This is the whole chapter distilled into one line. God did not free Israel from Egypt, then step back to let them fend for themselves in whatever new arrangement life had handed them. His deliverance wasn't a one-time event that he just moved on from. He was there with them. It was the basis for an ongoing relationship where God kept intervening. He kept setting boundaries. He kept guaranteeing release because they were still his. That is a God that fights for you. I want you to hear this as a direct word over you this morning, not just history. Whatever you have been carrying like it's yours to hold up on your own, by yourself, all alone, whether it's debt or guilt or that false burden, a false burden that you've quietly taken ownership, you belong to Him first. That claim, it outranks the one that you've been living under. So whatever, wherever you are at, I don't mean geographically, I feel like emotionally. Wherever you're at this morning, that claim, it reaches you very specifically. If you're just starting out in your life and you're still trying to figure out your calling, that claim means that your future was never dependent on you piecing it together perfectly on your own. If you're in the middle of raising a family and you're exhausted and you're stretched thin, that claim means that you were never actually meant to be the sole source of your household and everything that it depends on. And if you're rebuilding after a hard season, right? A divorce, a layoff, a diagnosis, that claim, it means that the rebuilding was never something that you had to do solely by will alone. And if you're further along and you're watching your children grow and you're wondering who you are outside of what you've managed for decades, that claim, it means that your worth was never actually tied to how much you were holding together in the first place. He owned you before any of those seasons started. He owns you in whichever one that you're standing in right now. And I think that so many of us have been operated like your rescue, those times where He's delivered you, was like this one-time event that happened once, and then you were just kind of left on your own to manage everything else in the silence. That same God who brought Israel out of Egypt, He kept showing up in the details of their actual lives, in their debt, in their land, in their servitude. It was because His claim on them never expired. It never expired on yours either. I think that some of us can point to the exact moment where God actually rescued you from something. Like, God, you showed up in a big way, like a season from an addiction. Some of you could have experienced it within a relationship or a diagnosis, a financial collapse, and you've genuinely thanked Him for it. But then somewhere along the lines, you quietly went back to just managing everything else on your own, as if that one rescue was the whole relationship, rather than just the beginning of one. I would love for you to hear this part, okay? He didn't rescue you once so that you could step back and watch how you would handle the rest. He rescued you so that you'd keep coming back to Him after every single thing after. Okay. I also think that some of you are living like you have to keep re-earning the rescue that already happened. Like one bad week or one lapse, the moment that you didn't handle it well, it undoes what He already did. It doesn't, right? His claim on you was never performance-based. His claim on you was made before you did anything to deserve it the first time, and it actually doesn't get revoked because you've had a hard Wednesday. And for whoever needs this specifically this morning, if you feel like you've drifted so far from Him that His claim doesn't apply to you anymore, I want you to hear this. Especially you, okay? Israel wasn't rescued because they earned it. They weren't kept because they stayed perfectly faithful to Him afterwards. There's nowhere in Scripture that even shows that they continued in the mandate that they had given Him, or that He had given to them. The claim held because it was His to make, not yours to maintain. The covenants that God gives to us are His to uphold. We never earn our way into His love. And it cannot be revoked due to insufficient performance. You didn't rescue yourself the first time, and you're not responsible for holding on to that rescue through sheer effort now. Okay? Can you guys say this as a declaration to Him, no matter where you're at in your faith? He carries what I never could. I want you to hold on to that today. He carries what I never could. I want you to look back across this entire chapter one more time, okay? There are fallow fields. That means these are fields. What does fallow mean? I have this in my text, actually. I'm going to say it wrong. Where is it at? A fallow field is a field that, where did it go? I want to say a fallowed field is a field that is going to produce, right? Like an abundant field. I don't remember, you guys. I'll find it and I'll tell you guys. There's those fields, okay? There's canceled debts. There's redeemed land. There's freed servants. I want you to see this, though. None of it was triggered by Israel proving that they earned it. Okay? The release date, it was set before anyone had accumulated a single debt to be released from. That's the thing that I need you guys to see. He's mandating these things and they don't even have it. It's like him saying you're going to accumulate a massive house, a massive debt, and you're like, I don't even live there. That's because he can see the end from the beginning. He knows what you're about to walk into, and he already makes a way before you ever even take a step into that season. This release date was set before they were ever even in servitude. He's mandating something that they haven't even lived yet. The redeemer role existed before anybody even needed redeeming. So that claim when he says, "You are my servants," it was made back in Egypt. That was before any of the circumstances in this chapter ever even happened. This is what grace actually looks like in practice. It's not a reward that is handed out after enough good behavior. It is a release that was already scheduled. It was waiting for the moment that you're finally ready to walk into it. He is not waiting to see if you've carried enough or given enough or proven enough before he lets you rest. Because that rest, it was already built into the design before you ever asked to work at all. Okay. I feel like we should give him glory for that. He is not a God who makes you earn what he already decided to give you. You cannot redeem yourself out of something that you were never meant to carry alone. False burden is what happens when stewardship quietly becomes ownership. The trumpet that we spoke about, it already sounded. The debts were already canceled, right? The question is whether you're still working in that old system. Are you trying to hold on to a debt that was already settled? So at the start, I asked you all, I said, fill in the blank, right? I can't rest right now because if I stop, what falls apart? What falls apart? Your finances, your marriage, your children and their upbringing, this career you're pushing towards. What is that? Or whatever that was when I asked you in the beginning. I want you to think about that. But I also want you to notice something about it. Whatever you've named, it was never actually yours to hold alone in the first place. You were asked to steward it, whether it is your children, your marriage, your business, your career, your health, right? You're asked to steward it. Somewhere, you ended up promoting yourself to the owner of it. Okay. We unintentionally promoted ourselves. And the God who built rest into the very design of the entire nation's food supply is not asking you to prove that you can carry this without him. He's asking you to put it down long enough to remember whose it actually is. Okay? So if any of this, thank you, Billy. I do have to say this too. If you guys, I know that we love gathering together as a family. Go follow Billy. Billy is one of the few creators that I actually love tuning into. It's not that I don't love tuning in, but like he makes his live so fun and he goes live. I think he does it, is it Monday through Saturday, Billy? How often do you go live? You go live like twice a day. Go follow him, okay? I'll put him in the chat. Billy, say hi so they can follow you. How do I? I'm going to reply. He's fun to hang out with. So you guys go follow Billy. But if any of this spoke to you, if something in you felt like there was something around ownership or false burden or actually trusting God in what you can't control, right now what we're going to do is we're going to go through this. We do this every Wednesday. It's our Hearing God Through the Noise Challenge. It's a free experience that I take you guys through. It's learning how to find His voice in the middle of our real life. Okay? How to hear Him throughout the noise. And I pray at the end of this, you'll start to see patterns where you can actually notice the difference between what God is actually saying to you and the fear or old patterns that have been replaying instead, okay? So we're going to go through that here in just a second. And I do need to say this too, because I haven't said this throughout the entire study, except one time, which is not my norm. Do you guys see that little icon up here? How it shows this little gold icon. There's one at the bottom left of your screen. You guys should be able to see that. If you click on that, I have a ton of resources for you. We have our text reminders for the Bible study. I have gifts in there for you. We have our Tuesday prayer calls. And then today, we have our garden session. Okay? We have our garden session today. It is at 12 p.m. Central. And so in that, I invite each of you to join us for one free garden session. Actually, I shouldn't say each of you, because there are men on here. All of you ladies, thank you, Cindy. All of you ladies can join us as a guest in our garden session. This is a time where we join as a sisterhood and I bring a topic. And we just navigate it together. And so I invite you ladies to join that if you would like. It's part of our paid community, but I invite you as a guest to join us in that. And we discern a topic together, find some clarity in it. And then in that, it's a Q&A session. So we just navigate that regardless of whether you have a business or not. So in that bottom left corner of your screen where you see that gold icon, there should be an option that says garden session. And I allow you to pick which time works best for you, which session would work best for you. And then it sends you a link to register for it so it can send you all the details. Okay? So we're going to move into our Hearing God Through the Noise Challenge here in just a second, but I'm going to invite you guys into prayer. We're going to pray out this study. And I invite you all to put in one word of whatever it is that you're navigating. It doesn't have to be one word, but it can be just as simple as that. We're going to pray out the study and then go into our Hearing God Through the Noise Challenge. All right? So, Heavenly Father, I thank you for today. Thank you for being a Father who sees any and every need that we may have. Thank you for going before us and allowing us to have that rescue plan. I pray that as we have navigated today, you've highlighted things for us that we can surrender at your feet, the things that we are holding on to. Father, I pray that that you give us eyes to see the things that we need to release, that we're holding on to in a way that we were never meant to carry. Thank you for being that good Father. Thank you for being provider, for being healer, for being El Roy, the God who sees. I thank you for all that you do for us. Every comment as it comes through, Father, I pray that you are with each and every one of us as we are navigating these struggles, that we can find moments where we just give you praise, that we don't grow weary. I thank you for all that you do in our lives, Father. In Jesus' mighty name I pray. Amen. All right. We're going to navigate into this part, but if you guys are hopping off, if you've already done our Hearing God Through the Noise Challenge, it's a little under an hour. If you plan on going to our garden session, it's in an hour from now. It's on Zoom. Make sure you click on that link. Again, if you've already attended one, I think my automated system just pushes back on it. So it'll let you know. And if that's an error and you actually haven't, it gives you instructions on it. So my system will send you out the link and the details. But if you want to stay for the Hearing God Through the Noise Challenge, we're going to dive into that right now. But for some of you, I might see you in that session here in just an hour. But until then, you need the new link. Cindy, yes, I do need to send you the new link because it changes every week for some of you that are in the paid community. So I will make sure I send that to you guys. What we're going to do now is that Hearing God Through the Noise Challenge. You have a beautiful day, Kat. If you are joining us for tomorrow and you want to get the replay, any of the replays to the Bible study. Oh, I do need to say this. I almost forgot. So don't leave yet. I sent out the email yesterday. So some of you may not have received it. So let me know if you would like it. I opened up our members only Bible study. So our member only Bible study, and I need to go through the topics. Give me just 1 second. So if you go to EdenandEmpire.com and you click on Bible study, there's a section option and it's called the thread. So the thread is our new series that we're doing. And we go through scripture even deeper into the common themes that we see. So the first themes that we're paying attention to are, gosh, my screen is so small. Give me just 1 second. The first 3 studies. So the first one starts on August 6th. And this one is the way back to Eden. So we're diving deeper into how the tabernacle and the temples and Jesus reveals God's plan to dwell with humanity. So we're taking everything that we've studied thus far and understanding how when Adam and Eve left Eden, essentially humanity lost more than a beautiful garden. They lost that unrestricted access to the presence of God. So what we're diving into this first study is examining the connections between Eden and the tabernacle and the temple. That included their entrances, the materials used, the garden imagery. We're diving into deeper elements of that. That's on August 2nd. And then on September 3rd, we're looking at God as the center, okay? What Israel's wilderness camp revealed about holiness and identity in the presence of God. And then on October 1st, we're looking into the book Jesus reached for. So how Deuteronomy actually shaped the words and obedience and ministry of Jesus. So we look into deep patterns into scripture. And so this one is, because we are doing so much, this one is our paid study. And so I sent that out to you guys. That's available for you on my website. And my moderators message me about it. I have something for you. But if you guys go there, you can join us. I am offering each individual person the opportunity to, it's $17 right now, if you join before the study. Afterwards, it'll be $27. So that's my gift to each of you for joining right away. But I sent an email out for that if you guys missed it. But we're going to go into our Hearing God Through the Noise Challenge. But I just wanted to remind you that the first study will take place on August 6th on Zoom in the evening at 8 p.m. So, all right, you guys. For those of you that are not staying for the Hearing God Through the Noise Challenge, I will see you all tomorrow for Leviticus 26. But if you are staying for the challenge, we're going to breeze right through it so we can get to our garden session, okay? So we have a lot of things going on. So our challenge is, was originally written as a 3-day challenge, but I condensed it into one live so you guys could experience the fullness of it without it being broken up. So there's something that God has been pointing you towards, right? You potentially feel it. I think for some of you, you felt it for a while and you have pieces of it. And maybe, I think for some of you, you have that full picture, but something in you knows that there is an assignment with your name on it that you haven't fully walked into yet. And if you're honest about it, there's probably a reason for why that hasn't happened. Okay? It could be a thoughtful reason, a responsible one. Some of you have several reasons. Today, we're going to look at those reasons differently. How many of you feel like God is calling you into something of more depth? Maybe you don't have, and if you do, I know that some of you maybe don't have the full picture, but you can feel it. Do we need anything for this? No. You guys all get the replays for this as well. In that same bottom left-hand side of your screen, there should be a Hearing God Through the Noise challenge in that resource. If there's not, let me know. Now that I'm thinking about it, I'm like, did I put that in there? Either way, you guys get all the replays for all of this, so you don't have to write anything down. Okay. There's only 2 of you that feel like God is calling you into something, that he has a big plan for your life. It's not in there? Darn it. Let me turn on this thing then. Thank you, Erica. I'm like, did I put it in there? Now that I think about it, felt like something was missing. Give me just a second. Mm-hmm. Now I don't know which is which. All right, so you guys should hear, or you should be able to see it. Do you guys see it? It feels so quiet now that I don't have music on. It should show up as one of your drop downs in the bottom left of your screen. So that's where you guys can sign up and get all the replays for this. Oh, I guess I need to turn my volume up. All right. Hopefully you guys can hear the music now. But so for those of us that feel like God is calling us into something, what we're going to be doing is learning to see what's been operating in the space between you and what God has called you to. Okay, there's something in that space. And for a lot of us, it's been sitting there long enough that it stopped feeling like interference. Because when we step into what God is calling us into, a lot of times noise is introduced. My goal is what we're going to be doing here in this next a little under an hour is to make it stop feeling like it's just noise and start feeling like a part of your reality. So what we're going to do first is entirely intel. You're going to recognize a lot of things here in this first part. I want you to see the pattern. So before we go anywhere, I want to establish this. The calling on your life is secure. We see this in Romans chapter 11, verse 29. The gifts and calling of God, they are irrevocable. That means that hell cannot unmake what God made. It cannot revoke what God ordained over your life. What is not guaranteed is your obedience to it. It is the specific people that you were meant to reach, the specific fruit of your yes in this season and what it was meant to produce. That is where that window actually is very real. So the calling on your life is real, but your obedience to it and the assignment that you have in this season, that has an expiration date. So I tend to use Esther as the example, right? Esther's calling was ordained, but Mordecai's warning was still true. So that if you remain silent at this time, relief and deliverance will arise from another place. So that calling on Esther's life, it didn't disappear, but the women who needed what she carried in that moment, they needed it in that moment. The enemy can't touch the calling, so what he does is he goes after the obedience. He goes after that window, and he keeps you circling long enough that the season actually passes. That's his strategy. That's what we're naming today. So I'm going to invite you guys to say this again. Can you just put the letter Y in the chat if you know that you've been circling something that God made very clear to you? You're circling it. You haven't fully stepped in it. You know that he's telling you to do something and you haven't fully done it. So I want you to see this, okay? Every person that God called in Scripture, they faced interference. Now, I want you to think of interference as like these thoughts in our minds that we tend to come into agreement with. Okay? It's noise. And they faced that noise. They faced those thoughts. But it was almost never destruction. It was almost always delay, but it was dressed as something that was probably sounded really reasonable at the time. So when we look at Eve, she didn't get attacked. She was faced with a question. So in Genesis chapter 3, verse 1, it says, has God indeed said, right? The enemy placed that doubt in her mind. That one question introduced just enough noise that she stopped trusting what she already knew. She didn't get destroyed, but she did get confused. Then we look at Moses, right? He didn't get stopped. He got intimidated into arguing. We see this in chapter 3, in verse 11 of Exodus. And he says, "Who am I that I should go to Pharaoh?" He was very called and commissioned, and he was still arguing. He didn't get destroyed, but he was intimidating into thinking that he wasn't the one for it, right? Then we look at Nehemiah, and he didn't get destroyed. He got distracted. His enemies, they kept calling him down from the wall. We see this in Nehemiah chapter 6, verse 3. But what he said to them is, "I am doing a great work so that I cannot come down." He received that invitation 4 times, and he gave that same answer 4 times. He didn't get destroyed. He got pulled at, though. And then there's Jesus. So right after his baptism, right before his ministry begins, he was led by the Spirit into the wilderness. The first thing that met him there was the enemy. We see that in Matthew chapter 4, verse 3. And the enemy said to him, if you are the Son of God, right? It wasn't an attack on the work. It was an attack on his identity. And that's because if you can destabilize who someone knows themselves to be, that work essentially stops before it even starts. So the most called person who ever walked the earth, he got tested before he ever even started. So if that happened to him, it's going to happen to you. It's not as a punishment, but as confirmation. The enemy doesn't waste opposition for people who are not called, right? He doesn't show up for women who are not a threat. And every single one of these people in Scripture, they weren't destroyed, they were delayed. He keeps trying to delay them from their calling. That delay, I guarantee you, it never looked like warfare to the person that was in it, though. A lot of times it looks like a very reasonable question. It looks like a legitimate hesitation. And for some people, it sounds like I need to pause and that feels responsible. That's actually why it works. So what Paul said in Ephesians chapter 6, verse 12, we do not wrestle against the flesh and blood, but against principalities and powers and rulers of the darkness, right? That means that the real battle is not where you've been looking. You've been fighting what you can see, but the actual source of it stays untouched. So in 2 Corinthians chapter 10, verses 4 through 5, it says that the weapons of our warfare are mighty in God, who are for pulling down strongholds, casting out arguments, and every high thing that exalts itself against the knowledge of God. So what that means is that a stronghold is not like a demon that's living in your house. It's a thought structure, and it has internal logic that's been in place that has it's been there long enough that it starts to feel like your own thinking. For some of us, it feels like discernment, and for others, it feels like wisdom. It just feels like you're being honest about what you see. Okay, that's actually what makes it so effective. It doesn't feel like warfare. It feels like a piece of your reality. So what happens is when we take this into account of how our brain works, right? Your brain has one job, and it's not obedience. It's survival. So it cannot tell the difference between a lion and a launch standing in something that you're about to launch. Okay. It treats both of those things as a threat. So when God actually calls you towards something that requires you to be seen, when he calls you to lead something that could fail, what our brain does is it fires this fear response before your faith can even respond to it. That part of your brain is called the amygdala. It fires before the part that's responsible for reasoning even gets a chance, which means that when we freeze or we try to second guess things or we have this sudden urge to start managing like a million different things before we actually start on what God has called us to, that's not a character issue. That's our biology, and it's firing before obedience can catch up. Our brain also runs this thing called the negativity bias. And so what it does is it weighs one critical comment that we receive heavier than 10 encouraging ones. So the one thing that didn't work, it tends to hold more sway than the 9 other things that actually did. Okay? So the enemy, he doesn't need to create the fear. Your brain already built it. So what happens is that all that the interference has to do is show up at the exact moment that your nervous system wants to pull back. And then what the enemy does is he sees that moment and he lets your biology carry the delay the rest of the way. He introduces that thought. Okay? That's not by coincidence. That is a coordinated strategy using what is already inside of you against what God has placed in you. There's some elements of that, Sandy, yeah. So before we name these patterns, I need to say this, okay? Not everything that feels like interference is actually the enemy. There's 3 sources to it. The first one is the enemy. And I think it's very easy for us to be like, oh, it's the enemy, it's the enemy. I do not love to give him more credit than what he deserves. Okay? But sometimes it is him. Some of the opposition that you're facing is an organized delay strategy that's designed to keep you circling long enough that that window closes. Remember I asked you all, and I'm going to ask again, how many of you know that God is calling you into something and you keep circling it? He's calling you into something deeper. Maybe to lead a group of women. Maybe it's to start a business. Maybe it's to step up in your household. Maybe it's to whatever it is, right? How many of you feel that way? You feel like, I know that God is calling me to something, but I haven't stepped into it. I'm like at the cusp of it. Maybe I don't. How many of you know what God is calling you into? Maybe let's start with that. Do you first, do you feel like God is calling you into something? That'd be a yes or no. I just need to gauge the room because I don't know where you guys are falling because there's only like 2 of you that are answering. And there's over 300 of you on. So I'm like, there has to be one or the other. No, you don't feel like God is calling you into it. So that's the first question. Yes or no? I know that God is calling me into something. You guys are totally fine. You can totally work and just listen. Okay, so there's that element of it. Now, my next question to you is, how many of you, since you know that he's calling you into something, know that you haven't stepped into it? So yes, you are circling it. You could just put why if yes, I've been circling it. Because we're naming these sources. So the first one is, sometimes it's the enemy, right? He keeps you in that space to delay you so that the window for you to step into it closes. That's his goal. The second one, sometimes it's God. God sometimes what feels like interference is God actually slowing you down on purpose. Not to delay the assignment, but to heal something that would compromise it. Sometimes that accusation, like that thought of, well, I'm not qualified for it, or I'm too old, or she's going to do it, like she has so many years ahead of me, right? That feeling of accusation on your identity, sometimes that needs to heal because it could compromise what he's calling you into. Sometimes it feels like an attack, but it might actually be God surfacing something and like an identity wound that he wants you to close before you go any further. And the third source sometimes is you, right? Unhealed places make decisions. So sometimes that fear that formed you, or sorry, I should say it like this. Fear that formed you, no, why can't I say this? Fear that formed in you long before this calling showed up, it's been disguising itself as discernment. So all 3 of those can actually produce that same feeling. This is why you need discernment. It's not just a pattern recognition. Discernment also develops in proximity to God over time. That's why so many, I could ask you guys right now, how many of you feel like you hear God's voice? I'm just curious. Like you can recognize, like, oh, God told me that. How many of you feel like that? I feel like so many of us struggle to understand when God speaks to us. Some of us are really good at it. I'm just curious where you guys land. Good. That discernment and that ability to understand him, that develops in proximity to him over time. So I'm curious, which of these 3 have you all been struggling with the most? Is it the enemy? Is it God or yourself? It could even be all 3. What do you feel like seeing those as potentially sources of these thought patterns coming into your mind? We'll name these thought patterns here in just a second. But what do you think you've been dealing with the most? The enemy, God, or yourself? And I'm going to adjust really quick, like lean back so I'm not sitting up. Okay. So we're going to go into naming what these patterns are, and I want you guys to know how to name them accurately. There's going to be 3 patterns that you're going to recognize. It's either going to be your primary pattern that you hear, your secondary, or your background. And for those of you that are just joining, we're just getting into this challenge that we're doing of how to hear God through the noise. Okay, so if you've missed any part of it or you need to hop off, there's replays available for each and every one of you. At the bottom left of your screen, there's a gold icon. Okay. So the primary one, when you hear this thought, that's kind of like your open door. This is the pattern that tends to hit first. So imagine yourself starting to walk in obedience. What is the first thought that you hear? Thank you, Sandra, for that. The primary is your open door. This is the pattern that hits first, and it hits first because there is something underneath it that hasn't been fully healed yet. The primary is not just where the enemy gets in, it's where God is actually doing his deepest work in you. So hold on to that. The second one is what sustains that delay. Okay? So when you start to walk in obedience and this thought comes in and it keeps you delayed, this one settles in after that first thought and it actually makes you hesitate to the point where it just starts to feel logical. It almost sounds spiritual to you. I cannot start this business because I cannot do ministry because I cannot stay at home with my children because, and then that's what keeps you delayed, right? Like patience, like stewardship, or sometimes like waiting on God. This one actually is one of the most quietly damaging of all three because it settles in and it keeps you delayed. The next one is background. So you're going to pay attention to where, which one of these thoughts just shows up in the background for you. Because this is actually where God has already been. The pattern that barely touches you, that's evidence. Something that actually used to have access to, it no longer does. That is a testimony that a lot of us have been walking in without recognizing in it. So you're going to tag all three as you listen to these patterns, these noises. And they're not just showing you where you are struggling. They're showing you what God is building in you, what's been sustaining the delay, and where he's already won ground, okay? So you're going to tag each one of these as your primary, your secondary, or your background. The first pattern that tends to show up is accusation. So accusation kind of sounds like this. Who told you that you could do this? Or you know what? You're not the kind of person that this works for. You can't go and start that thing. You don't even have a degree. How can you coach other people? You don't have a degree. You haven't even been formally trained. Or you know what? You can't start this business or this ministry. She has a decade on you, right? Or you know what? You keep starting things that you don't finish. This one is actually targeting your identity and qualification. So what does this one sound like for you? Is this a primary thought that you have? Is it your secondary, or is it a background? Yeah, you're new. What is that? Is that a primary thought for you? Like when you go to do something that, like you guys have excuses. I think of it like this. Is this a primary excuse that you have? Is it a thought that registers for you right away? Or is this the reason why you stay delayed? Because what I believe, when you hear this thought, God is building something that requires, or that stands entirely on your identity being settled in him. You need to fix your identity in him first. If you feel like you're not enough and the enemy's trying to target your identity, a lot of times underneath this argument, it sounds like this. I have been at this long enough that if God was really in it, there would be more to show for it. The lack of fruit is evidence. I'm just being honest about what I see. That's actually what makes this a stronghold, because it has evidence. It has a conclusion that already feels earned. Okay. The second pattern is confusion. This one sounds like, well, what if I just misheard God? Or like, what if the timing is wrong? I just need more confirmation, right? What if I move and it was just me? Underneath that argument, it kind of sounds like this. Well, God wouldn't let me go this far in the wrong direction without correcting me. So the fact that I haven't been corrected, it might mean that I'm already so far off course, right? If I wait for more clarity, that's probably the more responsible thing to do. The thing about confusion is it almost never resolves. It just regenerates. You get clarity and then a new question comes up, right? So what does this sound like for you? Do you tend to be confused initially, like that's the first thought that you have? Or is it your secondary and you stay delayed? Or is it your background? Like, I used to be like that, but I'm no longer like that anymore. Because what this one does is it actually targets your discernment. So if this is your primary, essentially the assignment that God is calling you to, it requires you to move on what God already said before that confirmation exists. Okay. The third pattern is intimidation. Intimidation kind of sounds like, well, I need to have all the answers before I present myself as somebody worth listening to. Or like, you know what? I can't do this. I can't go live on TikTok because I need a bigger platform first. Or like, I can't post on social media. Like, I want to post about this thing, but like, what if the people I respect see it and they think less of me? Or like, I want to start this business, but I said yes to God and I haven't even taken a single step yet. Ultimately, underneath this argument, it kind of sounds like this. Well, listen, if I do this quietly and it doesn't work, nobody has to know about it. So if I stay behind the scenes, that's not fear, that's just strategy. But the thing about intimidation is it doesn't need you to quit. It just needs you to not even begin. Okay, so is this a primary one for you, a secondary, or your background? Because intimidation, the heart of this, it targets your willingness to be seen. So essentially, if this is something that you hear predominantly before you step into your calling or step into obedience, the assignment potentially requires visibility that's going to cost something. Okay. The fourth one is comparison. So if you guys are just joining, we're going through a little challenge where we're identifying some of these thought patterns that come up right before we walk in or step into obedience. Okay. Pattern 4 is comparison. So this one sounds like, well, she did it better than me. Or you know what? There's no more room left. Or I'm too late. Actually, I should have started so much longer ago. Or like mine is just a version of this other person's. Or I scroll past this person's content and then I lose all motivation to create mine, right? Underneath this one, the argument, it kind of sounds like this. Well, I can't start that business. The market is too saturated. Or I can't go into ministry because everything I would say has already been said by somebody else who has way more credibility than me. Or I can't stay home. I can't stay home. Like, starting now just means that I'm a lesser version of what already exists. The thing about comparison is it makes that case that whatever it is that God is calling you into, that lane is so occupied that there is no point of even stepping into it. It ends up reframing this delay as part of your discernment. So if this is your primary, like the noise that you first hear before you step into it, God is potentially building something specific enough that that lane doesn't even fully exist yet. Okay, what would this be for you? Is comparison a primary, a secondary, or a background noise for you? The fifth pattern is distract. Discernment isn't even a pattern, it's distraction. So the fifth pattern is distraction. This one sounds like, well, once things calm down, I can start. Or like after this one season, then I can start what God told me to. Or like when I have more capacity, then I can do it, right? Or I cannot pour from an empty cup and mine is really empty. Or like I'll start whatever God called me to, but I just need one quiet week. Then I'll get started. And you know what? That week never comes, right? Underneath that argument, it sounds like this. I'm not saying no to what God is calling me into. I'm just trying to be a good steward of what's already in my hands. Later is not avoidance. It's stewardship. Okay. My mouse is like not working. Okay. The thing about distraction is it doesn't need your refusal. It just needs your postponement. Then what happens is that later becomes never so gradually, you don't ever even notice the shift. How many times has God called you into something and you keep saying later, 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 right? To the point where it just doesn't happen because you keep getting distracted. So underneath this one, if this is your primary, the assignment that you're about to walk into has a harvest window, and that's currently open. Okay. So then pattern 6 is isolation. This one, it sounds like, okay, I'll share it when there's something real to show. Like God is calling me into an assignment and I don't want to tell anybody yet because nobody in my circle understands what I'm building. Or sometimes it sounds like I can't tell anybody about it. I process things better on my own. Or like if I tell people, they're going to have opinions and I'm not ready to have opinions. So I just can't do it right now. But essentially underneath this argument, it kind of sounds like this. Well, if nobody knows what I'm building, then nobody can watch it fail. And if I keep it private, I stay protected. But isolation isn't about introversion. It's protection, but it's calling itself just part of your preferences. And if this is your primary, essentially or potentially what God is building, it cannot reach its fullest expression on its own. The last one is false burden. So this one actually targets your ability to discern what's actually yours. This one sounds like, well, I can't say no to this. I can't say no to the things that other people are calling me into. Somebody has to do it, right? I have to say yes to my family member or to my friend or to my coworker. My yes is what's holding this whole thing together. I'll get to my assignment once everything else or everyone else is taken care of. But essentially underneath his argument, it kind of sounds like this. If I put down what I'm carrying, somebody's going to suffer. And a woman who's truly called, she doesn't protect her capacity, she gives it. The thing about false burden is that it keeps you genuinely busy doing genuinely good things that are not the thing. If this is your primary and you hear this or tend to experience this, the assignment that God is calling you into, it potentially requires your full capacity and your ability to say no to what God did not assign to you. He needs you fully present, not managing 5 other things that he didn't ever ask you to manage. So I want you to take a look at which are your primaries. What would you guys say your primaries are? Is it accusation, confusion, comparison, delay, false burden, isolation, or what is the last one? I always forget which ones I named. Thank you, Sandra. What would be your primary? Because I want you to take a look at it and I want you to recognize it. Because what we're going to be doing is giving ourselves a way to combat it. Okay? We're going to figure out how do we block that resistance when it starts to come in. So you can put it in the chat. Because what we did just now, we named what's been running in our minds. Okay? Today, we learn what to do when it shows up. Because that insight alone, it doesn't necessarily that alone doesn't move you. You can have more than one you technically have one primary, but what do you see as your primaries? All of it you don't know. A lot of this, so this was originally, when I wrote this, it was meant to be done over 3 days. So if a lot of you feel like, I just don't know, pay attention over the next 24 hours to what shows up first when you start thinking about what God is calling you into. As you start to step into your assignment, think about what shows up, why you keep yourself delayed. Think of what shows up as the initial excuse, as the reason why you don't do it. That's your primary. That noise that tends to be the loudest. In the replays, like the reason why I'm having you guys sign up for it is because there's a workbook in it. And it'll help you discern some of these things. You can go deeper into it. And then you get the replays for all of it. Okay? And it will shift. These will all change. 1 week you can have distraction as your primary. And then the next week you can have false burden as your primary. That's because the enemy is running a sequence. Sometimes God is running a sequence, and sometimes you are running that sequence. What we're doing right now is learning to understand how to move even though we hear the noise. Okay? Because what we did is we just recognized some of these thoughts that come up, but just naming it doesn't stop those thoughts. What stops it is actually having somewhere to go when that thought comes in. I want you to think of this, what we're doing right now, they're counters. You're basically standing guard at your mind when these thoughts come in, and you're like a bodyguard. Okay? You're saying nope, and I'll explain why. Okay? A specific response is needed to interrupt that interference before your biology and those strongholds carry your delay the rest of the way. So, in Romans 12:2, it says, Paul says, "Do not be conformed to the patterns of this world, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind." So the renewing of your mind is not positive thinking. In the Greek word of this means a complete renovation from the inside. So what Paul does is he connects it to proving the good and acceptable and perfect will of God. Okay, so a renewed mind is not just a healthier mind. It's a mind that can discern what God is actually saying versus what that interference is generating, what that noise in your mind is telling you. How do you discern between what God is telling you and what your mind is trying to tell you. The counters, which is what we're going to go into now, they're not affirmations. Each one is a specific reorientation back to who God is at the exact point that that noise is trying to be introduced. That reorientation is what interrupts that stronghold long enough for you to walk in obedience, okay? So what makes these work long term is neuroplasticity. So your brain physically rewires itself based on repeated patterns of thought and response. So that interference, those interference patterns you just identified, they're not just spiritual strongholds. They're actually well-worn neural pathways, and your brain fires them automatically now. It's because somewhere along the line, that seed was planted in your mind and you kept watering it. Okay? So what happens is when you go to walk in obedience, that thought just comes automatically. So every time you use these counters, what you're doing is resetting your mind. You're beginning to build a new neural pathway. You're beginning to block those thoughts completely out, and your brain strengthens whatever gets used. So Holy Spirit renews the mind, and obedience rewires the brain. You need both of them. So a lot of times that secondary thought that you have in your mind, it's been running a lot longer and it's been hiding in your mind deeper, which means that when you go to use these counters for your secondary, it's going to require you to use them more consistently before it feels natural to you. That is not going to be a reason to give up. You just need to continue to practice it. I want to know on a scale of 1 to 10, how loud is that noise in your mind today? That noise that tells you you're not enough, that you're behind, that she does it better than you, that you need to take on all of the things that your family is, go ahead, you can say something, that you need to take on all the things for your family, right? How loud is that noise for you? 1 being not loud at all and 10 being super loud. What would that be for you today? Because what we're going to do is we're going to walk away with 2 counters. Your primary counter is what you're going to use the moment that those thoughts fire. And it's going to stop the entry. When that thought that keeps you delayed starts to feel reasonable to you, like logical, like I can't start that business. I honestly don't have money right now. When you catch yourself explaining the postponement, that's when you're going to use this secondary. Okay? So when you feel accused, you're going to tell yourself, calling first, confidence later. Calling first, confidence later. The reason is because God never called a qualified person first. Moses moved towards Pharaoh and he was still stuttering. Esther, she moved towards the king and she was still afraid. And David, he ran towards Goliath before the victory ever existed. That confidence that they had, it came through the obedience, not before it. So when we say calling first, confidence later, it's not just a phrase. It's actually how God has always worked. Then you're going to think of one moment in your own life when God asked you to move before you even felt ready, and he showed up anyway. In your own story, not somebody else's. You're going to say it from that place. You're going to say calling first, confidence later, and you're going to take a step of obedience. Okay, when that thought first comes in, you're going to say that. Now, if you're starting to feel like you can't do something because you're not qualified for it, and it's keeping you delayed, if this is your secondary, you're going to say, he sees what I don't. God sees what you don't. So when that accusation arrives as your secondary, it's using your history as evidence, okay? It's saying, this is your past track record, your lack of fruit, your lack of qualification, right? That counter, when you use it, it returns you to the one whose perspective is not limited by what you can actually see. Because God, he had full visibility of everything that accusation was pointing at when he called you to it. He knew that you weren't qualified. He called you to it anyway. It's not news to him. His word over you is not issued based on your performance, and it cannot be revoked by it. So I want you to think of a moment where God saw something in you that you couldn't see in yourself, and he proved it. Because he sees what you don't, and he always has. So when you use that counter, that's the God that you're returning to. Okay, for those of you that feel confused a lot of times, I want you to say this. Right when you are about to step into something and you feel confusion, you say, what is one faithful step in front of me right now? What is one thing that I can do to walk in obedience? In Psalm 119, verse 105, it says, your word is a lamp to my feet. Okay, That lamp to the feet, it shows the next step, not the whole road. Because we don't need to see every part of what God's plan is for us to step into it. Because God has never asked anyone to see the full plan before moving. Abraham, he left without knowing where he was going. We see that in Hebrews chapter 11, verse 8. He obeyed and he went, right? God has always been a next step kind of God. He's not a full map kind of God. So you just say, instead of being confused, what is one faithful step I can take? And then you think of a time that he gave you just enough to take one step and you took it. And then he gave you the next one, right? He didn't change because he's still doing that now. That step is clarity. Movement produces clarity. And if staying confused, like if you sit in that posture of confusion, if that's your secondary, you're going to go back to the last clear thing that God said and do that. Okay? So when confusion arrives as your secondary, that clarity, it didn't disappear. A lot of times what happens is it gets buried under the noise that your primary introduced to you. That first thought, it gets buried underneath that first thought. So you're going to think of a moment that you had clear direction from God before the question started regenerating. That thing didn't change. The noise changed, but God didn't. You're going to go back to what he said and do that. Because his faithfulness to speak, it doesn't expire because things get loud. Okay? So if before you step into your assignment, you tend to feel intimidated, you're going to say this. What is a 10-minute version of this? What is something that I can get done in the next 10 minutes? So in Zechariah chapter 4, verse 10, it says, "Do not despise small beginnings, for the Lord rejoices to see the work begin." The work beginning. So God rejoices at the start, and he always has. So you're going to think of a moment that you started something very small for God, and then you watched him do something with it that you could never have produced on your own. That's the God that is present at the 10-minute version, because he doesn't wait for that polished version to show up. He shows up at the beginning. Okay. This one, it doesn't get a secondary. That's because intimidation feels the same regardless of when it shows up. So you're just going to say, when I tend to feel intimidated, what is one step that I can do in the next 10 minutes? When you start to feel yourself comparing, you're going to say, I am enough as I am. I am enough as I am. In 1 Peter chapter 4, verse 10, it says, "As each one has received a gift, minister it to one another." It's not a version of somebody else's. He wants yours. God didn't call the future version of you. He called you right now as you are with what you currently have. Okay, so you're going to think of a moment that God actually used something very specific about you. How he made you, right? Your voice, your story, your particular way of even seeing something that like nobody else really sees. He designed that on purpose, and he wasn't confused with who he was calling. So when you say, I am enough as I am, it's not a feeling about yourself. It's a declaration about the God who designed you specifically for this. This one doesn't get a secondary. It's because comparison actually runs the same argument no matter when it shows up. Okay, you're going to say, I am enough as I am. The fifth one is distraction. Okay, so when you tend to get distracted right before God is calling you into something, you're going to say, you know what, whatever this distraction is, when does this get done? And you're going to give it a day and a time. And you're going to do it on that day and that time, not right now. In Psalm chapter 90, verse 12, it tells us, teach us to number our days that we may gain a heart of wisdom. So when we number our days, it's actually a stewardship posture that's rooted in the understanding that God works inside of time. So he gave you these specific days for a reason. So when you start to think of a time that you made a specific commitment to move towards God and what he placed in you, and he met you there, right? He is a God who shows up when you show up, and you're going to give it a day and a time. You tell that noise like, listen, I'll get to you, but not right now. That's an act of faith in a God who meets faithfulness with faithfulness. And when you tend to keep delaying yourself with other distractions, you're going to tell yourself this. What did later cost me last time? When I said later, what did that cost me the last time I said later? So when distraction comes in as your secondary, it makes later feel very responsible. The counter isn't a technique. It's actually a practice of remembering What did agreeing with later cost you the last time you said it? What season passed? What window passed? Right? It's not as condemnation, but it's a reminder that God's faithfulness, it doesn't change, but the windows of your assignment do. You're going to look at what it cost you the last time, and you're going to use that as evidence that moves you now. Okay? The sixth one is isolation. What you're going to do is you're just going to tell one person what God told you. Because in Ecclesiastes chapter 4, verses 9 through 10, it says, 2 are better than 1 because they have a good reward for their labor. For if they fall, one will lift up his companion. So God has always worked through community, right? I want you to think of a moment where somebody else's presence or their prayer or their word, like their specific showing up, was the specific thing that God actually used to keep you moving when you would have stopped on your own. Because he knew that you would need witnesses, and that assignment was never meant to be carried in silence. So that one is for isolation, and there's only one. There's no secondary for that. The last one is false burden, okay? This one is when false burden tends to show up. If this is your primary, you're going to say, is this actually mine or did I pick this up? When you want to swoop in and help other people, you ask yourself, is this mine or did I actually pick it up? You feel that sudden urge, like I know that I need to work my business, but I have to help somebody else with this. Before you do that, ask yourself, is this mine or am I just picking it up? In Matthew chapter 11, verse 30, it says, my yoke is easy and my burden is light. I want you to think about what that means coming from Jesus, okay? Not that the assignment itself is small, but that he carries it with you. And when that happens, I want you to think of a moment that you put something down that you'd been carrying alone, and you actually felt God step in and handle it. What happens is there's so much relief in that moment. That's what his burden feels like. When what you're carrying is crushing you, he's not asking you to carry it better. He's asking you whether it's actually yours or not. When you do that, it's not a boundary conversation. It's a stewardship conversation. And it's with a God who's specific about what he assigns, and he's faithful to carry what he actually gave you. When this one settles in and takes root, yep. Yeah, I think that's very relevant to answer your question. I think it's very relevant. Anything that is not, sometimes we spiritualize it, right? If church is asking me to do this, then I need to pick it up. You can set boundaries. If it's keeping you from the assignment that he's calling you towards, that's taking on something that was never yours to carry. It can happen in any setting. So if it settles in and it starts to take root and it keeps you delayed, ask yourself, what is the assignment that I'm protecting by staying busy? Because when false burden is the secondary, busyness is usually covering something. So I want you to think of what God has been consistently drawing your attention back to while your hands have been full of everything else. He's not pointing at it. He keeps bringing it up. That persistent return is his faithfulness. The busyness that you have been keeping yourself occupied is what's been answering him with not yet. Okay? So I want you guys to hold on to that. And I'm going to breeze through the third part of this so we can get to our garden session. And if you guys haven't had a chance to, if you want to join us for that garden session, at the bottom left of your screen, because we'll go into it right after I'm done with this live, it's just for ladies, by the way. I need to make sure I say that. You can RSVP to that. I allow each and every person to join one free session as a guest. We're going to be diving into that here on Zoom. So we can do the Q&A section. We can discern things together as a sisterhood. But just make sure you RSVP for that so it sends you the link. So you guys actually have everything you need right now. You have the maps, you have the counter, you have the sequence. You potentially have seen what's been running, and now you know what to do when it shows up. So what we're going into now isn't about giving you more information, because we named all of these 7 patterns. But I want to ask you something really honest. If nothing changes after today, Where are you going to be at in 6 months? Are you going to fully step into the calling that God has placed you, that he's placed over your life? Or are you going to keep delaying it? Not where you want to be, but where you actually are if you let these strongholds overtake you. I have watched so many women experience this. They've gone through this challenge and they go back to their regular lives, and the interference patterns and the counters that I give you, they're still accurate, but what ends up happening is those thoughts overtake them. They outlast the insight. Those neural pathways, they don't fully form. They don't get practiced enough to become automatic. So another season passes, another window, another more of like our life that was possible through consistent obedience. It just doesn't get lived. Okay? So the calling on your life is secure. We see that in Romans chapter 11, verse 29. We know that the calling on your life is irrevocable. God's plans will come to pass. In Isaiah chapter 46, verse 10, it says, "My purpose will stand." The enemy knows this. He's not operating under some illusion that he can defeat God's plan. He's very silly, but essentially what he's after is he's going after your life. He isn't going after the calling over your life in isolation. He wants the version of your life that only exists on the other side of that consistent obedience over time. Okay? So the women that you were specifically designed to reach, and the depth of the relationship that you have with God that develops through trusting him, he wants that. He wants that depth of relationship that develops with God over time through trusting him when the obedience to it is costly. He wants that. He wants a specific fruit of your participation in this season and what it was meant to produce. That's what he wants. And none of that happens if you never fully walk in it. The calling over your life remains, you just never fully live in that. He wants the free will. That's the mechanism that he's going after. God does not override your will to walk in the calling. He just doesn't do that. He places it in you. He extends the invitation and he equips you, but your yes is always yours to give. He calls and he waits and he keeps that invitation open, but he is not going to force you into obedience. That is precisely where the enemy operates. He knows that he can't touch the calling over your life, so he works on your will. He keeps you agreeing with the delay long enough that your yes never fully comes. So you keep the calling, you just never fully live it. How many of you, I want you to put a Y in the chat. We're just going to go with Y today. Can you put a Y if you've been holding the calling, but you've never fully lived it? You've been holding on to the calling of your life without fully living in it. I want to show you guys something. So in 1 Samuel chapter 7, David was not the biggest. He wasn't the most experienced or even the most qualified, right? He was actually the youngest, the one that his family didn't think to bring in from the field when Samuel came to anoint the next king, right? But when Goliath stood there and he was taunting the armies of Israel, and when that noise became so loud and it was visible and everybody else was afraid, David didn't wait for the noise to stop. He didn't wait until he felt ready. He didn't wait for those better conditions. What he did is he remembered. So in 1 Samuel chapter 17, verses 36 through 37, he says, "Your servant has killed both lion and bear." Okay. "The Lord who delivered me from the paw of the lion and from the paw of the bear, he will deliver me into the hand, or from the hand of this Philistine." Okay. So what he was doing is he wasn't operating on some abstract faith. He was operating on a specific remembered faithfulness. God had already shown up before that giant arrived because he had evidence, right? That evidence for him was enough. Going back to 1 Samuel chapter 17, but in verses 45 through 47, David said to the Philistine, "You come to me with a spear, with a sword, with a spear, and with a javelin, but I come to you in the name of the Lord of hosts," right? "This day the Lord will deliver you into my hand, for the battle is the Lord's." The battle is the Lord's. It's not yours. It's not the other person's. It's his. So Goliath wasn't the problem, right? Goliath was noise. He was a very loud, a very visible, taunting noise. And David ran towards it anyway because he remembered who the battle actually belonged to. That's what you're being asked to do in these moments. You're not being asked to silence the interference or to wait until you feel ready. You're going to run towards the assignment anyway, because you remember that the battle belongs to God, and you have enough evidence from your own life that he fights and he wins. Okay? So what you're doing with what I gave you is you're naming the noise and you're countering it. You're going back to his faithfulness. And then you're stepping into what he's calling you into. Not after that noise stops. Not even after you feel certain, right? After you remember. Because just like David did, right? He didn't run towards Goliath because the giant got quiet. He ran because the battle actually belonged to God and he had enough evidence to trust that. All right? So that's what you have today. And I give it to you guys as a gift. It's actually part of my paid community, what I walk women through. But that's my gift to you. So make sure you sign up for the replays for it, that you get that workbook that accompanies it, and it helps you move into what God is calling you into. All right? For those of you that want to join us on this next call, it's on Zoom. Make sure you hit that gold icon and you get the link for it. It's at the bottom left of your screen. There is a gold icon. It looks just like this one up here, but it's on the left side of your screen at the bottom. I think it's on the left. Anyway, you'll get all of the days or all of the parts of it. They're labeled as days, but it's now in 3 parts. Okay? And if any of you want to join us for our garden session, we're going to move through gaining more clarity. That's my gift to you guys as well. So I'm going to hop off. If you guys want that, make sure you sign up for the RSVP. That way I can send you the link. And I hope I see you guys here in just a second. If not, I pray that I see you on our Bible study tomorrow at 9 a.m.